Chapter 496. Didn't he Xianyao visit the Hua family so often because she liked Hua Jinyao? If Hua Jinyao had married He Xianyao at that time, their children would have grown up by now. He Xianyao cared about Hua Jinyao so much that she wouldn't want to have children. Not to mention that Hua Jinyao would coax and flatter her every day. Thinking of this, Lu Tongjia looked at He Xianyao in a different way. He Xianyao felt a little uncomfortable under Lu Tongjia's gaze. The smile on her face froze. Lu Tongjia looked away and said calmly, "Since we met, let's go together. Just put it on my card for today." After the spa, Lu Tongjia suggested that they go for afternoon tea together. It was rare for her to be so interested in the spa. She was more enthusiastic than usual. The other three felt it, but they didn't know what Lu Tongjia wanted to do. After they went to a restaurant in a nearby 5-star hotel, Lu Tongjia pulled He Xianyao over and asked her to sit next to her. "Xianyao used to visit me often, but she hasn't been coming lately." "Why? You don't like me anymore?" "Why would I?" He Xianyao had been humiliated by Hua Jinyao. How could she go back to the Hua family? Although she didn't want to, the He family's business in Lin City had been taken away. She was really afraid of Hua Jinyao. "If you don't, you can come again next time. I'm old now, and I like to spend time with you young people." "Auntie, you must be joking. You're not old. If I hang out with you now, people will think that you're my sister. You're such a sweet talker." Lu Tongjia's smile became brighter. "I took it seriously. Next time, you have to come to see me more often." He Xianyao didn't understand what Lu Tongjia meant. Li Xiangyuan looked at Lu Tongjia's face and changed the topic. "I heard that your son got married. Jinyao has high standards. You might as well ask your daughter-in-law to accompany you instead of Xianyao." Lu Tongjia's face darkened when Li Xiangyuan mentioned Su Qingsang. She didn't hide her attitude at all. Mrs. Su and Li Xiangyuan looked at each other. Mrs. Su couldn't hide her curiosity and asked curiously, "What's wrong? You're married and you're not happy." "Happy? What was there to be happy about? Marrying a woman like that, he had no family background, no filial piety, and most importantly, his character was questionable." Every time she thought of what Su Qingsang had done with Zhang Yichen, she wanted to tell Hua Jinyao everything. However, she also knew that she didn't have any substantial evidence. Hua Jinyao was so obsessed with Su Qingsang that he wouldn't believe anything she said. She didn't speak, so the other two didn't know where to start. Lu Tongjia didn't want to talk about Su Qingsang. She felt disgusted. When they parted, she held He Xuanyao's hand and kept asking her to play. He didn't forget to say some specious words. She had always wanted a daughter-in-law like He Xianyao who had a good family background and a good family background. She wouldn't be an illegitimate daughter like Su Qingsang, who recognized her halfway. An illegitimate daughter was an illegitimate daughter, she couldn't be brought to the table. Hua Jinyao was obsessed and treated a blade of grass like a treasure. Lu Tongjia talked for a long time. Seeing that He Xianyao understood what she meant, she left. As soon as she left, Mrs. Su also left. He Xianyao sat in her seat and looked at Li Xiangshuan. She was confused. "Mom, what do you think Auntie Hua meant?" "I think she's dissatisfied with her daughter-in-law and wants Hua Jinyao to find another one." "That's impossible." She had heard a lot about the relationship between Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang in Lin City, even though she didn't see them every day. How could Lu Tongjia have such a thought? Didn't you hear her? She said that some women are so greedy these days. They don't want to have children, and they don't want to be filial to their elders. Li Xiangshuan was a smart woman. Hearing this, she understood everything. Even if Lu Tongjia didn't say it out loud, how could he not understand her insinuations? He Xuanyao's eyes lit up because of Li Xiangshuan's words, but only for a second. She thought of the humiliation she had suffered at the hands of Hu Jinyao and Su Qingsang. She was a little scared. Mom, then tell me, are you stupid? You'd better not get involved in this kind of thing. After all, they are mother and son. She's just dissatisfied now. When she gets over it, they'll be fine, but you'll be in trouble. After all, Li Xiangshuan had lived for a few years. She had seen this kind of thing many times. He Xianyao stopped talking, but she couldn't suppress the thought in her heart. She hadn't fought back against Su Qingsang when she humiliated her last time. But she couldn't say that to others. If she could get Lu Tongjia's support and push Su Qingsang down from the position of the young madam of the Hu family, Li Xiangshuan was still explaining the situation, clearly telling her not to get involved with the Hu family. However, He Xianyao already had an idea, so she didn't listen to a word. Seeing that her daughter didn't object, Li Xiangshuan left with her. After these people left, the place became quiet. But no one noticed that behind them, there was a spot that was blocked by a potted plant. Su Peijian sat there, and the smile on her face looked very strange. Su Qingsang had slowly adapted to life in Rong City. Other than when she was on duty, she would go back to the Hu family with Hu Jinyao on weekends to spend time with old Master Hu. Although Lu Tongjia still didn't like her, she was mentally strong and didn't take Lu Tongjia's dislike to heart. As Hu Jinyao said, as long as old Master Hu was on their side, it didn't matter how much Lu Tongjia didn't like her. As for Zhang Yichen, he disappeared again after that day. Hu Jinyao mentioned that he went back to the army. Hu Jinyao seemed to be really close to this uncle of his. She could hear the closeness in Hu Jinyao's words. In fact, not only Hu Jinyao, but old Master Hu also liked this nephew very much. Every time Zhang Yichen was mentioned, he was full of praise. Su Qingsang didn't know if it was an illusion, but every time old Master Hu and Hu Jinyao talked about Zhang Yichen, she always saw Lu Tongjia's face darken. Gradually, Su Qingsang figured out that Lu Tongjia didn't like Zhang Yichen, her cousin. However, what was the reason for this? At night, when they were sleeping, Su Qingsang rubbed her face against Hu Jinyao's chest and looked up at him. She wanted to say something, but didn't. She mentioned her doubts to Hu Jinyao. Hu Jinyao looked at her with a smile on his face. Do you care about my mother or my uncle? Do you care about my uncle? I don't care about either. Lu Tongjia didn't like Su Qingsang. She always talked to her like that. As for Zhang Yichen, there was a misunderstanding between them. Su Qingsang later found out that he was just trying to scare her, but she still felt uncomfortable. She wanted to stay far away from him. She only asked out of curiosity. I'm just curious. Hu Jinyao didn't care about her curiosity. He put his arms around her and rested his chin on Su Qingsang's head. My mother doesn't even like her own son. How could she like my uncle? He said in a low voice. Su Qingsang said almost without thinking, then, why does your mother dislike you? It was so strange. She knew it since she came to Rong City. Lu Tongjia didn't like Hu Jinyao at all, and it was unreasonable. Hu Jinyao was Lu Tongjia's only son. He was also the eldest son of the Hu family. Why didn't Lu Tongjia like him? Even though Su Qinghui loved Su Peijian, he didn't dislike Su Yusin. Even though she was an illegitimate daughter at that time, Su Qinghui just ignored her. He wouldn't treat her the way Lu Tongjia did. Su Qingsang didn't hear a reply. She instinctively wanted to look up, but Hu Jinyao pressed the back of her head tightly, not letting her look at him. Hu Jinyao. She wanted to see him clearly, but Hu Jinyao was very strong. He pressed her with one hand and turned off the light with the other. Go to sleep. Su Qingsang didn't move. She could hear that Hu Jinyao's voice was much softer than before, but she didn't understand why. Jinyao. Go to sleep. Hu Jinyao put his arms around her and lay down. He put his arms around her waist. The light in the room had been turned off. She couldn't see his expression, and she had no way of knowing what he was feeling. Since he didn't want to answer that question, Su Qingsang didn't ask. She put her arms around his waist and rubbed her face against his chest. She didn't ask again. Hu Jinyao didn't say anything. He felt the soft body of the person in his arms pressed tightly against him. She still had shower gel on her body, and there was a faint fragrance mixed with her own. He took a deep breath. He felt that his heartbeat, which had been disordered because of Su Qingsang's question, slowly returned to normal. Su Qingsang had been busy the whole day, so she was sleepy. She closed her eyes and fell asleep not long after. Hu Jinyao couldn't fall asleep. Listening to Su Qingsang's steady breathing in the dark, he slightly tightened his arms. After he fell asleep, he didn't hold her so tightly anymore. That night, the nightmare came again. The small, dark room. It was a mess everywhere. He ran in a panic, and behind him, the footsteps were getting closer and closer. Finally, an enlarged, extremely ferocious face came closer. The voice that came out of his mouth had troubled him for more than 20 years. Go to hell. Go to hell, the chaotic images that kept flashing through his mind, as well as the words, go to hell. It made Hu Jinyao fall into a nightmare. What was different from the past was that he didn't wake up this time. His body was stiff, and his hands unconsciously began to exert force. Su Qingsang was woken up by the heat. In such weather, she felt the hands around her waist getting tighter and tighter. Chapter 497. Before she was fully awake, Su Qingsang heard some heavy breathing in the room. She raised her head. She couldn't see Hu Jinyao's expression clearly in the dark, but she could feel that his breathing was heavy. Su Qingsang raised her hand to turn on the bedside lamp and found that Hu Jinyao was sweating. She had never seen Hu Jinyao like this. Jinyao. Hu Jinyao. There was no response. Hu Jinyao's brows were tightly knitted, and his face was abnormally red. More and more sweat appeared on his forehead. Su Qingsang could tell that Hu Jinyao was in a terrible nightmare at the moment. Su Qingsang reached out to pat his face. Hu Jinyao seemed to pause for a moment, but soon he frowned again. Hu Jinyao. Su Qingsang called again, but found that Hu Jinyao showed no signs of waking up. She leaned over, held his face with both hands, and kissed his lips hard. At first, Hu Jinyao's body was very stiff, but slowly he relaxed. Later, his forehead stopped sweating, and then he woke up. When he opened his eyes and saw what Su Qingsang was doing to him, Hu Jinyao was stunned for a moment. You're awake. It was the first time Su Qingsang saw Hu Jinyao like this, and she was really scared. Are you okay? Hu Jinyao blinked and thought of the nightmare. He reached out and held Su Qingsang in his arms. Did I scare you? No. Su Qingsang was worried about him. She propped herself up and looked at his face. His forehead was still sweating. She reached out and took a tissue from the bedside table to wipe his sweat. Hu Jinyao let her do whatever she wanted and looked at her beautiful face, which was right in front of him. He suddenly flipped over and pressed her under his body. He lowered his head and kissed her lips heavily. It was different from the gentleness she had when she kissed him just now. His kiss was fierce, domineering, and lingering. Ever since the two of them got together, Su Qingsang hadn't seen Hu Jinyao so fierce for a long time. She closed her eyes and let him do whatever he wanted. She felt that he was filling her and becoming one with her. He was crazier than ever before. She responded by wrapping her arms around his waist so that he could indulge more. When it was all over, both of them were sweating. However, Su Qingsang was not in a hurry to take a shower. He was still on top of her, and her hand was still on his back. "Are you all right?" Su Qingsang sounded a little nervous. Hua Jinyao remained silent. He buried his face into Su Qingsang's neck. She felt his breath brushing against the skin of her neck. It was a little itchy and a little hot. He did not say anything, and she did not rush him. Subconsciously, she gently stroked his sweaty back. Again and again, she gently patted his back as if she was coaxing a child. Hua Jinyao closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "I'm fine." What could have happened to him? It was all in the past. He was no longer that child. He had grown up. Su Qingsang's lips moved. She wanted to ask him what had happened. She wanted to ask him what he was dreaming about. But in the end, she didn't ask anything. She gently patted his back until she was tired and fell into a deep sleep. Hua Jinyao propped himself up after she fell asleep and looked at her little face, which was flushed because of the entanglement just now. He lowered his head and gently kissed her on the forehead. He carefully turned over and held her in his arms. He found a relatively more comfortable position so that she could sleep better. He stopped thinking about the nightmare and the hideous face in the dream. Hua Jinyao did not have any more dreams. Su Qingsang observed him for a few more nights after that day, but she did not see Hua Jinyao have any more nightmares. Of course, it was also possible that he had a nightmare, but she did not notice it. After all, she slept very well most of the time. If she slept too deeply, even if he had a nightmare, she might not know. But after that day, Su Qingsang did not ask Hua Jinyao about the dream that night. After returning to the apartment in the city, Hua Jinyao became even busier. During this period of time, he had several times more social engagements than before. Sometimes, he would ask her, but most of the time, she did not like to go to social engagements. Hua Jinyao did not force her. If she did not want to go, he would ask Yang Wenchang. She was still curious about Hua Jinyao's nightmare. She had a feeling that Hua Jinyao's nightmare had something to do with Lu Tongjia. Why did Lu Tongjia not like Hua Jinyao? Why did Hua Jinyao have a nightmare? She believed that the two things were related. Hua Mingguang and Hua Jinyao must know, but they would not say it. Su Qingsang thought of one person, Old Master Hua. Maybe when she went to the Hua family on Friday, she could ask Old Master Hua in private. When Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao entered the living room, they were stunned by the lively scene in front of them. In the living room, Old Master Hua was not there, nor was Hua Mingguang. Hua Mingmei and Hua Mingliang's families, who usually came, were not there. Other than Lu Tongjia, Li Wanyu, and He Xianyao were sitting on the sofa. He Xianyao was very smart. She knew that Hua Jinyao did not like her, and she had been ignored by him several times. However, Lu Tongjia's words moved her, so she couldn't help but want to try. But she was afraid that she would be humiliated by Hua Jinyao like before. So she called Li Wanyu. Li Wanyu was Li Junxing's younger sister and her cousin. They had a good relationship. Most importantly, Hua Jinyao was very close to Li Junxing. Hua Jinyao would not respect her, but he would respect Li Junxing. But that was only He Xuanyao's opinion. Hua Jinyao would respect Li Junxing, but only if Li Wanyu did not cause trouble. Brother Jinyao. Li Wanyu stood up when she saw Hua Jinyao. She had no other feelings for Hua Jinyao. She just saw him as a big brother. Knowing that he was married, but the person he married was neither Su Ruoli nor He Xianyao, made her feel a little uncomfortable. In her opinion, only the noble ladies in Rome City were worthy of Hua Jinyao. As for Su Qingsang, who appeared out of nowhere, who knew what kind of person she was? She had snatched Hu Jinyao away so easily. Especially He Xianyao, who had been visiting the Huo family so frequently. Everyone knew that Lu Tongjiao liked her and wanted her to be her daughter-in-law. But now, they were robbed by an outsider. She had become a joke in Rong City. So when she heard He Xianyao say that Lu Tongjiao only wanted her to accompany Hu Jinyao, she came without thinking. Last time, Hu Jinyao embarrassed them in front of Su Qingsang. Now, they had a chance to see Su Qingsang embarrass herself. They were all looking forward to it. Thinking of this, when Li Wanyu looked at Su Qingsang again, there was a faint emotion in her eyes. She probably didn't know that Lu Tongjia disliked her so much. Did she really think that she could be the young madam of the Huo family by marrying Hu Jinyao? Chapter 498. Su Qingsang saw He Xianyao at first glance. Naturally, she didn't miss the gloating look in Li Wanyu's eyes. She turned to look at Hu Jinyao and gave him a look. Hu Jinyao reached out and squeezed her palm, indicating that she had him to take care of everything. The corners of Su Qingsang's mouth lifted slightly. She found that she quite trusted Hu Jinyao now. The feeling of trusting a person, especially a man, was too subtle. But she found that she didn't have the initial resistance. Jinyao. Li Wanyu didn't miss the small interaction between Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao. To be honest, she felt a little uncomfortable. She felt that ever since Hu Jinyao got married, he had become less and less like the old Hu Jinyao. She would rather Hu Jinyao be as cold and aloof as he used to be. She didn't want him to ignore other women and only treat Su Qingsang well. Brother Jinyao. Xianyao and I happened to be free today, so we came to visit Auntie. We were just talking about you. Yeah, Hu Jinyao responded. Brother Jinyao. Li Wanyu was obviously dissatisfied with his cold attitude. However, He Xianyao tugged at her sleeve at this moment. After receiving He Xianyao's hint, Li Wanyu stopped talking for the time being. Since you're back, it's just in time. Aunt Zhou has prepared dinner. You can eat later. As she spoke, she looked at He Xianyao affectionately and even reached out to pull her to her side. Stay and have dinner with me today. As long as Auntie doesn't mind. How could I dislike it? Lu Tongjia glanced at Su Qingsang out of the corner of her eye as she spoke. You're getting old, so it's inevitable that people will dislike you. You don't know how happy I am that you are willing to accompany me. Su Qingsang looked at the scene in front of her, speechless. People who didn't know better would think that He Xianyao was Lu Tongjia's child. Hu Jinyao squeezed her hand. His expression didn't change at all. Mom, where are Dad and Grandpa? Your grandfather went to your granduncle's place. Lu Tongjia had called He Xianyao over because the old man wasn't home today. If the old man was here, He Xianyao wouldn't have a chance. Not only was old Master Hu not there, but she also asked Hu Mingguang to send old Master Hu over. Li Wanyu sat at the dining table, watching Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao sitting together. Even if she didn't like Su Qingsang, she had to admit it. When the two of them sat down, their bodies actually had a similar aura. One was handsome, and the other was delicate. Most importantly, she watched Hu Jinya put food and ladle soup into Su Qingsang's bowl naturally. It looked like he was very skilled. When had she ever seen Hu Jinya like that? For a moment, their eyes widened. Even though she had no romantic feelings for Hu Jinyao, she couldn't help but feel jealous when she saw how well he treated a woman. Speaking of which, Hu Jinyao was obviously the one who had known them longer, wasn't he? Now, with Lu Tongjia's support, she felt that she could still fight for him. After dinner, Li Wanyu sat with Su Qingsang for a while. She saw that Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao were so intimate, as if there was no one else around. She was more and more sure of her previous thoughts. The most important thing was that she still had to worry about Li Junxing. If Li Junxing knew that she had intervened in Hu Jiniao's business, he would probably be unhappy. Thinking of this, Li Wanyu didn't want to stay any longer, so she got up and said goodbye. Lu Tongjia was surprised that Li Wanyu wanted to leave so early, but Li Wanyu wasn't the highlight of the night, so she didn't have to ask her to stay. She asked Hu Jiniao to see Li Wanyu off. When she asked He Xianyao to come today, she specifically told her not to drive over. Hu Jiniao sat next to Su Qingsang and didn't move. Don't we have a chauffeur at home? Lu Tongjia's face suddenly darkened. You and Junxing are so close. What's wrong? Can't you take your sister home for a while? It's okay. It's the same if the chauffeur takes her home. Li Wanyu was smart now. No matter what Lu Tongjia and He Xianyao wanted to do, she didn't want to get involved. No way. Let Jiniao take you home. Lu Tongjia was very insistent. She stared at Hu Jiniao with obvious dissatisfaction. She had made up her mind to let him take Li Wanyu home. Jiniao, just take her home. Su Qingsang didn't know what Lu Tongjia was planning, but she didn't mind seeing what else Lu Tongjia wanted to do. Hu Jiniao gave Su Qingsang a disapproving look, but Su Qingsang winked at him. The two of them had been together for a few months and had gradually developed a tacit understanding. Hu Jiniao understood with one look from her. Although he didn't agree, he still stood up and said, Wanyu, let's go. After all, she was Li Junxing's sister and lived not far from the Hu family. She reluctantly took her home. Hu Jiniao left, leaving only Lu Tongjia, Su Qingsang, and He Xianyao in the living room. Lu Tongjia held He Xianyao hand and talked to her affectionately. Su Qingsang looked at the two of them, who were as warm as mother and daughter. Not only did she not feel annoyed, but she also found it interesting. He Xianyao was a little proud at first. But this smugness soon disappeared. Su Qingsang didn't look sad at all. She didn't even look aggrieved. Instead, she looked like she was watching a good show. Didn't she care about Lu Tongjia's feelings for her at all? She didn't know that Su Qingsang was really strong-willed. As an illegitimate daughter, she was ignored by Li Qianxue and looked down on by the servants of the Li family. Compared to them, Lu Tongjia's case was nothing. Lu Tongjia looked at Su Qingsang's calm face, and her anger rose little by little. She patted He Xianyao's hand and said with a sigh, speaking of which, Jiniao has been busy with work these years. Thank you for coming here to keep me company. Auntie, you're welcome. I'm not being polite. I really like you. Lu Tongjia glared at Su Qingsang as she spoke. Her attitude towards He Xianyao was completely different from how she treated Su Qingsang. She looked at He Xianyao as if she was looking at her own daughter. Xianyao, it would be great if you were my daughter-in-law. Auntie. No matter how thick-skinned He Xianyao was, she was still very embarrassed. I'm telling the truth. You're so polite and considerate. I believe that if you were my daughter-in-law, you would take good care of Jiniao, and not just let him take care of you. As she spoke, she glanced at Su Qingsang again. The meaning of that look was very obvious. Su Qingsang didn't seem to see it. She touched her nose and felt that the scene in front of her was quite interesting. But it's not too late. Xianyao, are you willing to be my daughter-in-law? Su Qingsang blinked. She, the main character, was still here. Was it really okay for them to say this in front of me? Auntie. He Xianyao blushed. I am willing. Su Qingsang was glad that she didn't drink water. If she drank water now, she would definitely spit it out. I knew I was right about you. Lu Tongjia breathed a sigh of relief. When she looked at Su Qingsang, there was contempt in the corner of her eyes. After all, you're much better than some selfish people who only care about themselves. Auntie. After hearing that, Su Qingsang asked casually, does Jinyao have any other brothers? Don't play dumb. I'm talking about Jinyao. Chapter 499. Auntie. Xianyao was embarrassed, but she still nodded. I do. Lu Tongjia seemed to have found some courage. She turned to Su Qingsang and said, did you hear that? She does. Yes. Su Qingsang nodded. She wasn't deaf. Miss He likes to be a mistress. If she hadn't wanted to figure out what Lu Tongjia and Xianyao were up to, she would have left already. She didn't expect to hear such a ridiculous conversation. Since they were so shameless, she couldn't be blamed for being rude. Xianyao's face turned from red to white. She stared at Su Qingsang as if she wanted to burn a hole in her body. What are you talking about? Lu Tongjia couldn't bear it anymore. Who wants to be a mistress? If you don't want to be a mistress, how do you plan to marry Jinyao? Su Qingsang blinked. Her pretty face was full of confusion. Why do I remember that I'm Jinyao's wife? Why don't you just divorce Jinyao? Lu Tongjia looked at Su Qingsang and didn't hide her dissatisfaction. Why don't you look at yourself? How are you good enough for Jinyao? Auntie. It's not up to you or me to decide whether I'm good enough for him or not. It's up to Jinyao to decide. Don't you think so? At the very least, if Jinyao wants a divorce or has other thoughts, he'll come to me himself. It's not right for you to make the decision for him. Su Qingsang, you think you have him in your hands, don't you? Auntie, you may have misunderstood. Su Qingsang knew that Lu Tongjia didn't like her, but she didn't really mind. After all, she wasn't money. Not everyone liked her. Jinyao and I are equal. I don't have him in my hands, and he doesn't need me to. That's one thing. Secondly, Jinyao and I have registered our marriage certificate. We are legally married. Our relationship is protected by the law. Even you don't have the right to ask for a divorce. Su Qingsang, don't you feel ashamed saying that? What did you do to make Jinyao marry you? Do you really think other people are stupid and can't figure it out? What method did she use? Su Qingsang blinked her eyes. She really didn't know when she had played tricks on Jinyao. Su Qingsang, if you still want to save face, you should take the initiative to give up your position. Don't make everyone look bad when the time comes. Auntie. I'm sorry. It was precisely because I wanted face that I couldn't give up my position. After all, I didn't cheat, and I didn't do anything wrong. Why should I ask to leave the court? You haven't done anything wrong. You don't even want to have children. Why would the whole family need a daughter-in-law like you? Or have you changed your mind now? Are you willing to have children now? I don't want to. Su Qingsang was not averse to having children. After all, she was an obstetrician and gynecologist. She just felt that it was still too early for her to have a child 2 years later. However, now that she was provoked by Lu Tongjia's aggressive attitude, she became rebellious. Auntie, I can tell you very clearly. I've already discussed it with Jinyao. We don't plan on having children anytime soon. Ha! Lu Tongjia was so angry that she laughed. Listen. You don't want to have children with Jinyao, and you want to stop others from having children. How can you do that in the world? Su Qingsang frowned. Before she could speak, Lu Tongjia continued, you saw it yourself. Xianyao is better than you in all aspects, whether in terms of family background or appearance. Most importantly, she is sincere to Jinyao. She doesn't have any ulterior motives. She is willing to do everything for Jinyao, to bear his children. You can't do those things. If you have self-awareness, you should divorce Jinyao as soon as possible. Don't waste his time. Xianyao blushed and sat on the side without saying anything. Su Qingsang looked at the shy look on her face and suddenly smiled. Auntie, I don't dare to say whether I will waste his time or not. But if Miss He really wants to be with him, I'm afraid that will really be a waste of his time. Her slightly narrowed eyes were full of cunning. She had known that Xianyao was shameless for a long time. Since that was the case, there was no need to save her face. After all, she took off her clothes and slept with Jinyao, but he didn't have any reaction. Under such circumstances, how could Jinyao have a child with her? Xuanyao's face was like a color palette that had been overturned. Her face was green, then white, then red, then black. She looked at Su Qingsang and suddenly stood up. She bit her lip and was about to rush out. Xianyao. Lu Tongjia grabbed her hand and turned to look at Su Qingsang. What nonsense are you talking about? You can ask Jinyao whether I'm talking nonsense or not. Su Qingsang stood up. She was tired of watching the show and didn't want to see it anymore. Miss He, if you want to have a child with Jinyao, I won't object. But the premise is that you can find a way to make Jinyao interested in you. Otherwise, how are you going to have a child? You are shameless. Xianyao knew what she had done, but when she saw the faint doubt on Lu Tongjia's face, she couldn't say what she had done. She turned to Su Qingsang and said, "Don't be too proud. Jinyao is just infatuated with you. He will see it sooner or later." Yes. It's okay. Infatuation is better than not having feelings for you. But you should think about what you can do next time. After all, you stripped naked in front of a man, but he ignored you. That's so embarrassing. Xianyao bit her lip hard. She didn't care that Lu Tongjia was still holding her hand. She shook off Lu Tongjia's hand and rushed out without looking back. She left in a hurry, but Su Qingsang could still hear her sobbing and see a few drops of tears falling from her eyes. Lu Tongjia's face darkened. She stared at Su Qingsang with her sharp eyes, as if she wanted to pierce through her. Okay. I didn't know that you were such a sharp-tongued person. Auntie, you are too kind. Su Qingsang took it as a compliment. I'm actually quite clumsy. I just like to tell the truth. Lu Tongjia's face turned green. Okay. You are indeed a schemer. I want to see. How long can you use those tricks on Jinyao? Auntie, I want to know too. How about I ask him for you next time? Su Qingsang found that she was becoming more and more shameless in front of Lu Tongjia. Lu Tongjia was so angry that she couldn't speak. In the end, she could only glare at Su Qingsang, turn around, and go upstairs without looking back. Su Qingsang felt a little helpless. Although she knew that it wasn't entirely her fault, she felt a little wrong that Lu Tongjia hated her so much. She turned around and saw that Hu Jinyao had come back. He stood at the gate and looked at her with a faint smile on his face. You're back. Before she could walk up to him, Hu Jinyao had already walked up to her, reached out, and pulled her into his arms. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead, with a smile on his face. You didn't give it away. Why are you back so soon? Not far. Hu Jinyao didn't want to tell her that he had warned Li Wanyu in the car. He was willing to care about his friendship with Li Junxing, but Li Wanyu had to think clearly about whether she was going to go against him. He suddenly lowered his head and pressed his forehead against her face. Xianyao wants to have children with me. You don't object? Ha! What are you thinking? Su Qingsang blushed. Did he hear that? I'm not interested in her. Hua Jinyao suddenly carried her in his arms. But I don't agree with what you said. He lowered his head and looked at her, his eyes full of seriousness. Next time, if someone says they want to have children with me, you can just say that I don't agree. After all, I'm yours now. Su Qingsang put her arms around his neck when she lost her balance. She also raised her head to look at him. Mine alone. Of course. Mrs. Hua. Su Qingsang smiled because of the way he called her Mrs. Hua. The drama she had just watched would be a sideshow. She took the initiative to put her lips on his and gave him a sweet kiss. However, when she was about to move away, Hua Jinyao caught her lips and deepened the kiss. With his tall figure, Hua Jinyao easily carried Su Qingsang upstairs. As for He Xianyao, who had made such a scene today, who cared about her? When Su Qingsang saw Shi Mengwan at the airport, her face was especially bright. She almost jumped up and hugged her. Previously, Shi Mengwan had said that she would come to Rong City to play with her. However, after waiting for more than a week, there was no news. She thought that she wouldn't come. Seriously, you only sent me a message before you got on the plane. Fortunately, I didn't have surgery today. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to pick you up. Although she didn't have surgery today, she had to go to work. Fortunately, Sun Huiya saw that she usually behaved well. She agreed immediately when she asked for leave for a while. I just wanted to give you a surprise. Shi Mengwan pulled her clothes. Although it was already spring in Rong City, it was much colder than Lin City. Although it was already spring, it was much colder than Lin City. Looking around, she was a little disappointed. Why is there no snow? Did you think there would be snow? It melted long ago. Why didn't you say so earlier? I'll take you to the snow country next time. The snow had melted long ago. Besides, even in the north, it didn't snow every day. Okay. But this time, I'll eat you first. Warmly welcome. Su Qingsang took the luggage from her hands and took her to the parking lot outside. After putting her luggage in her car, Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao got in. When Shi Mengwan got off the plane, she wore a scarf and sunglasses. Now that she was in the car, she took off the scarf and sunglasses, revealing her face. Su Qingsang was about to start the car, but when she saw her face, she stopped. She leaned over and stared at Shi Mengwan's face. Chapter 500. Really? Shi Mengwan touched her face and looked at Su Qingsang with a guilty smile. Maybe it's because I stayed up late drawing last night. You. Su Qingsang poked her forehead. I'm not in Lin City, and you're messing around, aren't you? I'm not messing around. Shi Mengwan's smile became more and more stiff when she thought of running into Zhang Haoze again yesterday. Meeting Su Qingsang's concerned eyes, she reached out and hooked her arm. She said half-jokingly, "Who told you to abandon me? You're not in Lin City, and I can't even eat." Poor you. Su Qingsang clicked her tongue and patted her on the shoulder. Okay, I'll take you to eat delicious food today. Of course. Shi Mengwan glared at her. You're the wife of the president of Tianyu Group. Aren't you embarrassed to ask me to eat at a roadside stall? There's nothing to be embarrassed about. If you complain again, I'll treat you to spicy hot pot. Spicy hot pot. Speaking of which, the two of them ate quite a lot when they first lived together. Because there was one not far away from them, it was convenient and simple. Okay. I'll eat it if you dare to treat me. After eating, I'll post it on WeChat and Weibo. I want everyone to know how stingy Mrs. Hua is now. Post it. Hurry up. Su Qingsang and Shi Mengwan chatted and laughed. The two of them seemed to have returned to the time when they first lived together. She was too happy to see her good friend, so she didn't notice the flash of worry in Shi Mengwan's eyes. Su Qingsang brought Shi Mengwan home and let her stay in the guest room. Shi Mengwan entered the door and looked at the decoration in front of her. Not bad. This is definitely low-key luxury. It had a minimalist modern style, but one could tell that everything inside was of high quality. She often designed wedding dresses for clients, so she knew about some cutting-edge brands. This house belongs to Hu Jinyao. Then he had good taste. Yes. It's close to his company and not far from our hospital. So we'll stay here. This apartment only had one floor. However, it connected the two into one. They were the only family on the entire floor. The two families made the room look very big. Not only that, but there was also a huge balcony on the top floor. When they had nothing to do, they could enjoy the scenery from up there. However, Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao didn't have much time. He placed Shi Mengwan's luggage in one of the guest rooms. Fortunately, Su Qingsang had thought that Shi Mengwan would come over, so she had packed everything. Su Qingsang took out the bed sheets and spread them on the bed. Shi Mengwan wanted to do it, but Su Qingsang asked her to sit down and chat with her. Shi Mengwan looked around but didn't see Xiang Kaiping. She was a little confused. Why didn't I see Auntie? Isn't she living with you? With Xiang Caiping's personality, why didn't she live with Su Qingsang? Su Qingsang paused in the middle of making the bed. She felt that she couldn't explain it clearly on the phone. Now that she was here, she finally had the time to tell Shi Mengwan about her background. She told Xiang Kaiping about how she and Li Qianxue had reconciled with each other and how Li Qianxue had accompanied her to Rong City before the Lunar New Year. She told Xiang Kaiping about how she and Li Qianxue had come to Rong City together. Even now, Li Qianxue still video called her almost every day. As for Old Master Li and Su Yusin, they were slowly building a relationship. That's what happened. The bed was already made. Su Qingsang looked at Shi Mengwan, who was dumbfounded and shocked. Finally, she clicked her tongue, stood up, walked to Su Qingsang, and walked around her. Oh my God! Your background is actually so bizarre. Su Qingsang found it unbelievable. I didn't believe it at first. But the paternity test can't be fake. Moreover, only she knew that she was touched, grateful, and protective of Xiang Kaiping, but she didn't have the instinct to get close to her. Shi Mengwan suddenly patted her on the shoulder. Good girl, you knew it during the New Year, didn't you? You didn't tell me. You're not a good friend. Su Qingsang pressed her lips into a straight line and looked a little guilty. I'm sorry. It's not that I didn't tell you on purpose. She didn't know what to say. More importantly, the situation at the time didn't allow for it. You know how my mother, Auntie Xiang, was at that time. Her waist was injured, and she wasn't in good spirits. I was afraid that if you knew, you wouldn't be able to hide your emotions and give yourself away in front of her. So I didn't say it. Besides, she had decided to treat Xiang Kaiping as her own mother. What did it matter whether she said it or not? Shi Mengwan nodded. Although she could control her emotions, it was really a little difficult to guarantee that she wouldn't reveal anything. It must have been hard for you. You hid it for so long. Speaking of which, you stayed with her for so long. Didn't she suspect anything? No. Su Qingsang shook her head. Why would she suspect anything? She felt guilty and uneasy at that time, so she naturally wouldn't think so much. That's true. Thinking of what Xiang Kaiping said in front of her at that time, Shi Mengwan could really understand. Then, where is Auntie Xiang now? I didn't ask anymore. Su Qingsang thought of the last time she met Xiang Kaiping. She blamed her for not telling her earlier, and the two of them parted on bad terms. But I heard that Su Peijian has accepted her as her mother and moved in with her. I think she should be slowly building a relationship with Su Peijian. Speaking of which, it was really a very tragic thing. She and Li Qianxue, Xiang Kaiping, and Su Peijian. They were mother and daughter, but because of Su Qinghui's actions, they had to rebuild their mother-daughter relationship. They were related by blood, but they couldn't get along like a normal mother and daughter. Shi Mengwan quite liked Xiang Kaiping. Thinking of Su Peijian's personality, she instinctively frowned. With Su Peijian's personality, will she accept Auntie Xiang? Why do I feel that this is so magical? Why not? Su Qingsang didn't think it was strange. After all, she is her biological mother. Moreover, she had her own reasons for abandoning her. Maybe. Shi Mengwan didn't want to talk about conspiracy theories. Anyway, she felt that Su Peijian wasn't the kind of person who would so easily accept a strange woman as her mother. So, you and your mother are your biological mother. How is your relationship now? She didn't forget that every time Li Qianxue saw Su Qingsang, she would look at her with disdain. His face was filled with disdain and disregard. Now that she knows that Su Qingsang is her biological daughter, her expression must be very interesting. It was a pity that she didn't get to see it. That's good. She had been busy with work recently. After all, my father left the Li Corporation, and she has to make many decisions. Old Master Li was getting on in years. Li Qianxue couldn't bear to see him work himself to death. Therefore, Li Qianxue was now in charge of the company. Su Yusin didn't live on campus anymore. When he was free, he would go to the company to help out. In any case, his grades were good and he would not lag behind in his studies. Helping out at the company could be considered as an early internship. Although Li Qianxue didn't need Su Yusin to be so busy, it would be better to have a child to accompany her. Your father is no longer in the Li Corporation. So where is he now? What are you doing? I don't know. Su Qingsang shook her head. She really had no idea. He had heard from Su Yusin that Su Qinghui had visited him a few times and only said some words of concern. He also apologized to Su Yusin for neglecting him in the past. Also, asked him to take care of the family. He said that he was about to become an adult and was an adult. Su Qingsang didn't know if he had visited Li Qianxue. Because Li Qianxue seemed to be very reluctant to mention Su Qinghui. She had asked her once. Although Li Qianxue wasn't angry, she could see that her expression wasn't good. Su Qinghui had actually called her once, and the content was also to apologize. To apologize for his decision to replace the child. Unlike Li Qianxue, Su Qingsang didn't blame Su Qinghui too much. In fact, she was more willing to believe that Su Qinghui was impulsive back then. Even if he had done it on purpose, things had already turned out this way. She also didn't want to let herself fall into the mood of being responsible and didn't want to blame him. After that, Su Qinghui never contacted her again. She did take the initiative to call Su Qinghui twice, but the father and daughter didn't have much affection before, so they didn't know what to say when they really called. They just said a few greetings and then hung up. Su Qinghui cared about her situation in Rome City and told her to take good care of herself. It had been half a month since the last call. Therefore, Su Qingsang didn't know where Su Qinghui was and what he was doing. He probably doesn't want others to see him like this. After all, Su Qinghui's current state shouldn't be too good. Not only did he leave the Li Corporation, but he also divorced Li Qianxue. More importantly, after the divorce, he realized that he actually had feelings for Li Qianxue. It was really quite ironic. When he had it, he didn't know how to cherish it. When he lost it, he wanted to get it back, but found that there was no chance. Shi Mengwan thought of the few times she had interacted with Su Qinghui in the past and felt a little emotional. Did your mother really divorce him just like that? Yes. Su Qingsang actually didn't want to believe it, but Li Qianxue was such a proud person. She probably really didn't want to look back. During this period of time, she could actually see the hidden fatigue in Li Qianxue's eyes. Although she had been the president of the Li Corporation for so many years, many things were Su Qinghui who took the initiative to help her bear the responsibility. In addition to the previous cooperation between the Li Corporation and Tianyu Group, Li Qianxue had been very busy recently. Sometimes when she video called her at night, she was still in the office dealing with business. Su Qingsang actually felt a little sorry. She wanted to persuade Li Qianxue that even if they divorced, she could let Su Qinghui continue to work in the Li Corporation. However, thinking of Li Qianxue's personality, she didn't say that suggestion in the end. She wanted to say a few words, but Li Qianxue obviously didn't want to. Chapter 501. Let's not talk about them. Let's go out for dinner. Su Qingsang took out her phone and called Hu Jinyao to ask if he was done with work. If not, they could have dinner together. Hu Jinyao had a business meeting that night. She hung up the phone and smiled at Shi Mengwan. There's no other way. It's just the two of us tonight. Hu Jinyao has been very busy recently. He seems to have a lot of things to do in the company. But don't worry, he'll treat you to a big meal tomorrow. Shi Mengwan put her arm around Su Qingsang's arm. What? Are you afraid that I'll be unhappy? It's better without Hu Jinyao. The two of us can have a good talk. After telling Mizu that she didn't have to cook that day, Su Qingsang took Shi Mengwan to the restaurant closest to her house. This is the property of a friend of Hu Jinyao. The dishes here are very special and the name is nice. Although there were only two of them, when Su Qingsang showed her gold card, the waiter immediately took her upstairs to a private room specially prepared for the VIPs. Sure. Mrs. Hua. Shi Mengwan took a step back and looked at Su Qingsang. Have you noticed that ever since you started dating Hu Jinyao, you've become more and more like a rich lady? Nonsense again. Haven't I always been like this? She rarely came to places like this. She usually came with Hu Jinyao. But Hu Jinyao's friends were nice. This restaurant was the property of Wan Xianing's family. He was the one who gave her the gold card. The two of them were taken upstairs by the waiter. Su Qingsang asked Shi Mengwan and ordered a few signature dishes. While waiting for the dishes to be served, they talked about each other's recent situations. Su Qingsang didn't have much to say. Hospital, home. Speaking of which, ever since Lu Tongjia had a disagreement with her, she had been summoned back to the Hua family twice by Old Master Hua. He Xianyao was there both times. But Old Master Hua was there, so He Xianyao only went to visit Old Master Hua as a junior. After dinner, she didn't stay long and left. During that time, Lu Tongjia kept praising how considerate and polite He Xianyao was. Not only did she visit her often, but she also went shopping with her. Last time, she also went with her to the Women's Chamber of Commerce. The Women's Chamber of Commerce in Rong City was actually founded by the wives of the well-known families in the business world. Usually, he would do some charity work. On one hand, she was helping others. On the other hand, she was promoting her husband's company. Xianyao might have done it. Speaking of which, she has helped a lot with the company's business. Whoever marries her in the future will marry a good wife. Even though Old Master Hua was there, Lu Tongjia didn't mind praising He Xianyao. The others could tell that Lu Tongjia was unhappy with Su Qingsang. However, Su Qingsang pretended that she didn't notice it. She continued to act as normal with Hu Jinyao. If she really came to Rome City, it would be inconvenient for her to go home to see her parents. It's fine if you don't come, but you have to promise me. Take good care of yourself. Don't worry. I will. Shi Mengwan was too embarrassed to say that she didn't look very well these days because of Jean Hauze, and it had nothing to do with her staying up late to draw pictures. Su Qingsang was really worried when she said that. Shi Mengwan used to draw day and night. In the past, she lived close to Lin City, so she always had time to keep an eye on her. Now she was really worried. Thinking about it, she suddenly had a suggestion. Speaking of which, since you're here, why don't I ask Hu Jinyao to take you to meet his childhood friends next time? I think they're all good people. They're all elites. Do you want to pick one of them? Su Qingsang was willing to believe that Jean Hauze, whom Shi Mengwan had met before, was her big brother. But he already had a fiancée. Shi Mengwan really wanted to wait for him for the rest of her life. Su Qingsang felt wronged for her. Shi Mengwan's appearance and figure were both excellent. Even if her family background wasn't the best, she had opened her own studio and the business was good. Her reputation was also slowly building. It would be a pity to spend the rest of her life with that completely impossible person. We'll see. Shi Mengwan didn't want to talk about it. I don't want to get married now. Who asked you to get married? I'm asking you to fall in love. It's okay to enjoy love, right? Even if you don't think it's suitable in the future, you can break up. If it were anyone else, Su Qingsang wouldn't have persuaded her like this. But seeing Shi Mengwan wait for her big brother year after year, who knew where he had forgotten her, she really felt that it wasn't worth it. All right. You don't have to worry about my business. You can just live a good life with Hu Jinyao. She didn't want to mention it, so Su Qingsang didn't say it. She and Hu Jinyao had been very close recently. They were almost as sweet as honey. Naturally, she also hoped that her best friend could be happy. Shi Mengwan was still thinking about how to change the topic away from herself when her phone rang. She took it out and glanced at it. The word enemy on it made her look a little uncomfortable all of a sudden. I'm going out to take a call. Shi Mengwan took her phone and walked out. She didn't know why Jean Hauze called her. She clenched her phone tightly and turned off the sound. She walked out of the private room and didn't decide whether she should answer it or not. If she answered it, what would she say? While she was still struggling, the phone had already been hung up. Shi Mengwan was a little surprised, but it seemed to be expected. Leaning against the wall, she held her phone and leaned against the wall, unable to come back to her senses for a long time. Just as she was about to go back to the private room, her phone rang again. Thinking it was still Jean Hauze, Shi Mengwan picked it up without looking. Unexpectedly, it was a call from the studio. Her face was full of disappointment. After talking about the main topic, she looked at the phone screen that had gone dark. She let out a long sigh and didn't return Jean Hauze's call. She walked towards the private room, but saw a woman in front of her coming out of the elevator and entering one of the private rooms. That figure looked like Su Peijian. Shi Mengwan blinked. Before she could see clearly, the other party had already entered the room. She was slightly nearsighted, so for a moment, she wasn't even sure if it was really her or if she was seeing things. She looked again and found that not long after, another man followed her into the room. Shi Mengwan watched for a while longer and finally believed that she might have seen things wrong. Su Peijian should still be in Lin City at this time, right? How could she be in Rome City? Besides, why did she come to Rome City? Shaking her head, Shi Mengwan didn't take this matter to heart. If the person who saw that figure just now was Su Qingsang, then she would know that the person sitting only 3 private rooms away from them was Su Peijin. At the Huo family. Lu Tongjia sat on the sofa in the room and looked at Huo Mingguang, who was reading a book. Her face was obviously dissatisfied. What do you mean? As the current chairman of Tianyu Group, is it so difficult for you to arrange for someone to enter the company? Tongjia. Huo Mingguang put the book in his hand aside and said, "It's not that it's difficult for me to arrange for someone, but you have to arrange for this person to be by Jiniao's side. Jiniao's people were all chosen by himself. He may not use the people I give him." Chapter 502. Jiniao chooses his own secretaries. Even if I send them to him, he might not use them. He has more than one secretary. Besides, I remember that Zhang Yang's wife is going to have a baby. He seems to be planning to take a leave of absence. Don't think that I don't know. When I went to the company last time, I happened to hear it. Jiniao had more than one secretary, but Zhang Yang was the one he relied on the most. He had been with him for several years. Other than him, Yang Wenchang, his assistant, took care of everything. She didn't even want the position of an assistant. She just wanted a secretary, and it wasn't a particularly important position. Why couldn't she get it? Huo Mingguang looked at Lu Tongjia and felt a little helpless. He knew what his wife was thinking. Tongjia, Jiniao is already married. Why do you? What did I do? Lu Tongjia looked at Huo Mingguang. She didn't think she did anything wrong. What did I do? I did it for his own good. Only Huo Jiniao would treat such a woman like a treasure. Huo Mingguang didn't know what to say. He didn't have a problem with Su Qingsang. To Jiniao, no matter what, Huo Jiniao was his son. Even if he couldn't get over it, he wouldn't be as angry as Lu Tongjia. I don't care. I don't care how you do it. Anyway, I'll leave it to you. You don't have to be so angry. I'll ask someone to arrange it tomorrow. Is that okay? Lu Tongjia finally looked a little better, but there was still a hint of worry on her face. Huo Mingguang got up, walked to Lu Tongjia, and put his arm around her shoulder. I won't try to persuade you. I'm just afraid that Jiniao will be dissatisfied with you in the end. By then, he'll be dissatisfied with me. Lu Tongjia sneered. I don't need him to be satisfied with me. Which one of the things he has done has satisfied me? None, not a single one. If he doesn't satisfy me, why should I satisfy him? Am I his mother? Or is he my mother? Huo Mingguang didn't say anything. He just patted her shoulder. Lu Tongjia was depressed. She leaned her face against his chest. Mingguang, do you think I'm being unreasonable? The last time she brought He Xianyao home, old Master Huo was very dissatisfied with her and looked very angry. Later, she didn't forget to tell Huo Mingguang in private to restrain herself. Restrain? Why did she have to restrain herself? Huo Jiniao didn't restrain himself at all. She hated the old man for being so biased. It was clear that Huo Jiniao had made such a big mistake. It was clear that he had wronged everyone in the family. How could old Master Huo let him off lightly? No. Huo Mingguang had been married to Lu Tongjia for more than 30 years. They had gone through ups and downs together, so he knew her very well. He knew the pain in her heart, and he also knew the difficulty in her heart. Mingguang. To tell you the truth, I really don't want to see my grandson come out of the womb of a woman like Su Qingsang. He was full of schemes and tricks. You didn't see the way she talked to me before. I really don't like her. Of course, she would not admit that she disliked Huo Jiniao even more. Because she didn't like Huo Jiniao, she was very critical of Su Qingsang. Huo Mingguang understood. All right, don't think too much about it. I'll arrange the people for you. As for what happens next, it's not my business. Okay. Lu Tongjia nodded and looked up at Hua Mingguang. Her eyes were a little red. Mingguang, thank you. Hua Mingguang was silent and sighed in his heart. After so many years, he also had a grudge against Hua Jinyao, so he let Lu Tongjia do whatever she wanted. However, thinking of how much Hua Jinyao cared for Su Qingsang, Hua Mingguang suddenly had a vague premonition. This time, Lu Tongjia probably wouldn't get what she wanted. Shi Mengwan looked at the antique door in front of her and looked a little impressed. The environment here is really good. How did you find out? I don't need to find out. Su Qingsang glanced at her and shook the gold card in her hand. Hua Jinyao told me yesterday. He said that this place is good. It's just the right season to come here. It was Friday, and Hua Jinyao had to go to work. He couldn't accompany them. More importantly, he knew that Su Qingsang wanted to have a good time with Shi Mengwan and her two good friends. President Hua is quite a good person. Shi Mengwan gave her an ambiguous look. But you really don't have to ask for leave to accompany me. It's not like I haven't traveled alone before. That's different. You came all the way here. I have to be a good host. Su Qingsang took her hand and said, let's go. Speaking of which, it's all thanks to you. After all, it's my first time here. If it weren't for the GPS and Hua Jinyao telling her the place yesterday, she might not have been able to find it. Just say that you wanted to come out and have fun, so you used me as an excuse. Shi Mengwan joked with Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang nodded repeatedly. Wow, you saw through me. I'm going to kill you. As she spoke, she reached out her hand and was about to strangle her. Shi Mengwan laughed and dodged it. After a while, the two of them entered the door together. This time, Su Qingsang brought Shi Mengwan here to go to the hot spring. This place was a gift from a client who had worked with Hua Jinyao. After that person gave the gold card to Hua Jinyao, he had only brought a few of his childhood friends here twice. This time, when Shi Mengwan came, he thought of this place. All the buildings were designed to imitate the Suzhou Gardens and looked antique. However, the privacy inside was very good. Like the Japanese hot spring hotels, each hot spring was separated by a small space. This place is really nice. Su Qingsang looked at the environment in front of her. It looks even bigger than the hot spring hotel I went to in Japan. And the environment is even better. It's not bad. Shi Mengwan also nodded, her face full of admiration. Let's go. Let's enjoy ourselves today. I heard that there's a spa next door. We can go there after we finish the hot spring. Then what are we waiting for? I can't wait. Su Qingsang and Shi Mengwan first took a good look around the club. Although it was already winter, she didn't know what method the people in the club used. There were a lot of green plants that she didn't know the names of, and there were even plum blossoms. Wow! Shi Mengwan couldn't help but exclaim, why are the plum blossoms blooming at this time? Shouldn't it have bloomed already? Almost. Look, the flowering period is almost over. We're in luck. Some of the plum blossoms were about to wither. But it still didn't affect the two of them. It's really good. Shi Mengwan hugged Su Qingsang. Qingsang, I'm very satisfied with today's arrangement. Don't worry, it'll make you even more satisfied. It was Friday. Su Qingsang had time to accompany her tomorrow and the day after. In the evening, Su Qingsang and Shi Mengwan went to the spa first, then went to the hot spring in the small room. The hot spring water was brought into the room from outside, and then the room was directly turned into a small hot spring pool. Although it was called a small pool, it was actually very big. It could accommodate 7 or 8 people to go into the pool together. Because of the hot spring, Su Qingsang and Shi Mengwan only wore swimsuits and went into the water. The two of them soaked for a while, and Shi Mengwan heard the phone on the small table on the shore ring. The ringtone was specially set by her, and she knew it was Jean Hausa. She was stunned for a moment, and she didn't move in the hot spring. Su Qingsang was on the other side of the hot spring pool. Hearing the ringtone, she turned to look at her. "Your phone is ringing. Do you want me to get it for you?" "No need." She had marked Jean Hausa's name as enemy. With Su Qingsang's sharp senses, she would definitely find something wrong. "I'll do it myself." Shi Mengwan got up to get the phone. After getting the phone, she looked at the number on it for a few seconds, and finally put on the bathrobe prepared by the club. "Qingsang, I'll go out to take a call." "Okay." Su Qingsang waved her hand and didn't think much about it. Shi Mengwan took the phone and went out, while she continued to soak in the hot spring. Not long after, she heard light footsteps, and then the sound of the door being opened. When Shi Mengwan went out, she was in a hurry and didn't close the door, but just left it unlocked. Now that the door was opened and closed, Su Qingsang thought it was Shi Mengwan coming back. "Are you done with the call?" "What call? Why did you go outside?" "Uncle." Looking at the person who suddenly appeared in front of her, Su Qingsang was stunned. She wanted to scream, but at the same time, she restrained herself. Then, almost instinctively, she shrank her body into the hot spring. Zhang Yichen didn't expect to see Su Qingsang here. Although it was misty in the hot spring, he could still see her clearly at a glance. The bikini that Su Qingsang was wearing, and he quickly turned around so that he wouldn't take another look. "Sorry." He saw that the door was unlocked, so he thought that there was no one inside. "You." Su Qingsang wanted to say something, but at that moment, there was another flurry of footsteps outside. Zhang Yichen's expression changed, and he looked around. Although they were called small rooms, they weren't small at all. In addition to the hot spring, there was an inner room with a bed and a bathroom. On the side, there were cabinets for customers to hang their clothes. Zhang Yichen glanced at Su Qingsang, then glanced around the room. At last, he dashed into the closet where the clothes were hung. Before he went in, he glanced at Su Qingsang. He didn't say anything, but the meaning of his eyes and movement was obvious. Seeing his series of actions, Su Qingsang didn't know how to react for a moment. She heard the footsteps coming closer and closer, and then she seemed to hear someone arguing in the next room. Someone must have disturbed them. Soon, someone knocked on the door of her room. Chapter 503. After standing there for a few seconds, Su Qingsang opened the door. There were several people standing outside. Seeing her open the door, they seemed to be about to rush in. Su Qingsang quickly stood in front of them, looking at the behavior of these people in front of her. "Who are you?" Su Qingsang didn't let those people in. She glanced around. There were at least 5 people standing in front of her, all wearing black suits. She could also hear the protesting voices of the guests on the other side of the corridor. Obviously, they were dissatisfied with their behavior. The hot spring was very warm inside, but the wind in the corridor was a little cold. Su Qingsang tightened her bathrobe and looked at the people in front of her with a guarded expression. "What do you want?" The man in the lead took a step forward when he saw Su Qingsang. "Sorry, our boss just lost a dog. We came to look for it. There is no dog here." Su Qingsang frowned because of what he said. Dog? Was he talking about Zhang Yichen? "Yes or no, let us go in and have a look." "Sir, I'm here to spend money." You came into my room casually and disturbed me while I was enjoying the hot spring. Can I complain to your boss? I'm sorry, boss. The lost dog is very valuable. We must find it. As the man spoke, he raised his hand and was about to let the people behind him rush in. How could Su Qing-sang let them in? She stood in front of them and said, I advise you to think about it carefully. I'm not someone you can mess with. Do you know who I am? The man in the lead had a mustache. Hearing that, he stopped rushing in and took a step back, looking Su Qing-sang up and down. Su Qing-sang was wearing a bathrobe, and her hair was tied up on top of her head. The man couldn't recognize her just like that. Su Qing-sang stared at the man and said, I am the wife of Hu Jinyao, the president of Tianyu Group. Aren't you afraid that my husband will be unhappy if you rush in like this? The man with the mustache narrowed his eyes and looked at Su Qing-sang. Su Qing-sang didn't hesitate and took a big step back. Come on, you want to find a dog, right? Come in and find it. But I'm here to spend money. My husband gave me the card. He was also the one who told me to relax here. If you insist on coming in to look for it, I won't object. However, if you don't find the dog and cause me trouble, then I really don't mind telling my husband that this is how you treat your VIP customers. The mustache man still wanted to say something, but the person standing behind him took a step forward and said something to the mustache man. The man with a mustache stood there and stared at Su Qing-sang. He didn't make any move to rush in, but he still had to say, We're just looking for a dog. Madam, please let us go in and take a look. I said, there are no dogs here. I'm a big man. How could I not know if a dog came in or not? Or could it be that you're doing this on purpose to make me unhappy? When she said this, the manager of the club also came over. He obviously knew that Su Qing-sang was here with the limited VIP gold card. When he saw Su Qing-sang, he nodded vigorously with an apologetic smile on his face. Sorry. Mrs. Hua, your subordinates are immature. They're not targeting you. It's just that this dog is really my boss's beloved pet, so we must find it. Please do my boss a favor and let my people in to take a look. Just one look. Don't worry. We promise not to disturb you. Su Qing-sang stood still, obviously not intending to move away. The manager could only go further. Mrs. Hua, don't worry. Our boss and Mr. Hua also know each other. They are both people in the business circle of Rong City. I believe that even if Mr. Hua was here, he would give our boss face. Why don't you let us disturb you for a few minutes? Hearing what the manager said, Su Qing-sang smiled and said, Okay. Just a few minutes, right? It's okay. Come in and look for it. As she spoke, she took 2 steps into the room and then stood in front of the wardrobe casually. Go ahead. The club manager glanced at the mustache man. He came in with a few people to take a look around. The room was so big that it was easy to see if there was anyone hiding in it. The man stepped back and looked at Su Qing-sang's position. Behind her was the wardrobe. The mustache man obviously wanted to look at the wardrobe. Su Qing-sang smiled when she met his eyes. Sir, do you still want to search the wardrobe? Why? Do you suspect that your dog can run in by itself? Come and find. As she spoke, she pretended to pull the door of the wardrobe. The mustache man cleared his throat. No need. Sorry to disturb you. The club manager also nodded vigorously. Sorry to disturb you, Mrs. Hua. We will go to Mr. Hua's place to apologize another day. No need to apologize. Su Qing-sang crossed her arms in front of her chest. I came here to relax. To put it bluntly, I came here to enjoy myself. Since you know that I disturbed you, why don't you leave? What? You don't want me to stay here anymore, do you? Is this how you do business? Sorry, we will leave now. We are really sorry to disturb you, Mrs. Hua. Please understand. As the club manager spoke, the mustache man was still staring at the wardrobe behind Su Qingsang. It was obvious that he wanted to open the wardrobe and search it again. His gaze made Su Qingsang even angrier. She took a step forward, her face full of anger for being disturbed. After the manager repeatedly apologized and said that all of Su Qingsang's expenses that day were free, he left with the mustache man and the others. Su Qingsang didn't relax because they were leaving. Instead, she kept standing in front of the wardrobe. Her face was always in an unhappy state, which made the man with the mustache turn around and look at her for the last time before he left without any more doubts. Su Qingsang looked casual, but only she knew how stiff she was and how nervous she was. When the last person left, she slowly walked up and closed the door. As soon as the door was closed, she leaned against the door and didn't move. Only she felt a layer of cold sweat on her back. Just now, she was really worried that the mustache man wouldn't give up and would insist on opening the wardrobe. She waited for a while to make sure that the sound outside was far away, then went forward and opened the wardrobe. Zhang Yichen walked out of the wardrobe. Thank you. You're welcome. Su Qingsang shook her head and looked at Zhang Yichen's clothes. He was also wearing black. They were looking for you just now. Yes. Can I ask, what did you do? Su Qingsang asked, then realized that she didn't ask. With Zhang Yichen's status, he couldn't say anything. Nothing. I took something from their boss. Zhang Yichen didn't say anything. Su Qingsang didn't ask anymore. The people outside the door hadn't left yet, and Zhang Yichen couldn't just leave like that. Looking at Su Qingsang, who seemed to be a little embarrassed, he thanked her very sincerely. You're welcome. Su Qingsang had already calmed down. She believed that if those people wanted to come back, they wouldn't do it now. I should thank you. You gave me a chance to use my identity to pressure people. Whether it was in Lin City or Rong City now, this was the first time she used her identity to pressure people. It was interesting to think about it. Zhang Yichen looked at her. This woman was undoubtedly very smart. She had predicted all the possible reactions of those people. I think Hu Jinyao won't mind you using his identity to pressure people. Of course. He might be more than happy to do so. Thinking of Hu Jinyao, Su Qingsang's lips turned up into a faint smile. If Hu Jinyao found out about what happened today, he might even help her vent her anger again. That guy hated it when people bullied her. When she thought of Hu Jinyao, her eyes softened. Her face, which was originally only 7 points, instantly turned into 10 points. Zhang Yichen looked at her face. For a moment, he couldn't move his eyes away. Sensing his gaze, Su Qingsang's smile immediately disappeared. She took a step back uncomfortably. How are you going to leave later? Why do I remember that they have surveillance cameras? My colleague broke the surveillance cameras. The time limit was 15 minutes. It had been 10 minutes since he came in. Speaking of which, he should leave now. But they are looking for you all over the world. I don't think it's easy for you to leave, right? Su Qingsang didn't want to be nosy. However, since he was here now, she might as well ask him something. After all, he was Hu Jinyao's uncle. It's okay. I have a way. While speaking, Zhang Yichen tried to keep his eyes on Su Qingsang's face. The bathrobe she was wearing was a little too big. Even though she pulled it tight, her delicate collarbones could still be seen. Also, she crossed her arms in front of her chest, which made her figure stand out. She had just been in the hot spring. Because of that, Her skin looked beautiful and pink. She was as beautiful as a lotus flower that had just emerged from the water. Zhang Yichen couldn't help but think of Su Qingsang in the hot spring. Her shoulders were smooth, and her skin was smooth. It turned out that the beauties in the books were real people in reality. Zhang Yichen clenched his hands and forced himself to look away. Su Qingsang didn't ask any more questions. Since Zhang Yichen said he had a way, she didn't need to worry about it. The two of them didn't say anything. They just stood there, facing each other. The silence was a little awkward. Realizing the situation in front of her, Su Qingsang took a step back, wondering why Shi Mengwan hadn't shown up yet. Zhang Yichen's jaw tightened when he saw what she was doing. He tried his best to ignore her evasive attitude. He told himself that she was married and was his niece's wife. "Are you in the hot spring alone?" Zhang Yichen saw the door open. He thought it was an empty room, so he rushed in. He thought he could find a chance to hide. Chapter 504. Su Qingsang shook her head and said, "No, I came with a friend." After that, they didn't say anything else. Su Qingsang was wearing a bathrobe, but her clothes were disheveled. She felt very uncomfortable, thinking about how to end the situation. Zhang Yichen frowned at the awkwardness on her face. He was about to say something when someone knocked on the door. Su Qingsang and Zhang Yichen looked at the door at the same time. They both thought that the other person had returned. Zhang Yichen glanced around. He couldn't hide in the wardrobe anymore. There was a small window in the bathroom, but he couldn't get through it. Su Qingsang looked anxious as well. Under such circumstances, where could Zhang Yichen hide? Zhang Yichen was about to go to the bathroom when Su Qingsang heard Shi Mengwan's voice. "Why did you lock the door?" "I didn't lock it just now." Su Qingsang was relieved to hear Shi Mengwan's voice. She glanced at Zhang Yichen to tell him that it was okay. She turned to open the door for Shi Mengwan. As soon as the door was opened, she pulled Shi Mengwan in. She moved so fast that Shi Mengwan didn't have time to react. "Qingsang, you..." Shi Mengwan saw Zhang Yichen when the door was closed. She gasped, then turned to Su Qingsang with her eyes wide open. This is Hu Jinyao's uncle, Zhang Yichen." Su Qingsang pointed at Shi Mengwan. "This is Shi Mengwan, my friend. Nice to meet you." Zhang Yichen was quite calm. He greeted Shi Mengwan like this. "Nice to meet you." Shi Mengwan blinked and looked at Su Qingsang without saying a word. "Nothing. I just happened to meet him." Hu Jinyao didn't allow Su Qingsang to tell Shi Mengwan what Zhang Yichen had done. Surprisingly, Shi Mengwan didn't want to keep asking. Su Qingsang also forgot to ask Shi Mengwan why she took so long to make a phone call. Normally, she would have noticed that something was wrong with Shi Mengwan. With Zhang Yichen there, Su Qingsang and Shi Mengwan didn't want to go into the bathroom again. The two of them had just started bathing and wanted to stay a little longer. Su Qingsang looked at Zhang Yichen, then at Shi Mengwan. "Mengwan, shall we go back to our room and get some rest?" "Sure." Although they all wore swimsuits when they soaked in the hot spring, it was really embarrassing to have such a big man standing next to them. "Then you..." Both of them looked at Zhang Yichen. The hot spring room and their room were on opposite sides of the club. If they wanted to go back, they had to go through a corridor and then a small courtyard. If they left now, what would happen to Zhang Yichen? Zhang Yichen glanced at Su Qingsang, then went to the bathroom. The window was so small that no one could climb out of it. He was in too much of a hurry just now and forgot to look for the way. He looked around and suddenly had an idea. "Don't worry about me. If you want to leave, then leave." Zhang Yichen stood there without moving. Su Qingsang glanced at him and finally believed that he would handle it well. Shi Mengwan was a little confused, but she didn't ask further. The two of them brought their clothes into the small room and quickly changed. Su Qingsang was still thinking about how Zhang Yichen would leave later. However, when they came out, Zhang Yichen was already gone. Su Qingsang and Shi Mengwan looked at each other. They didn't hear the door open. They didn't know where Zhang Yichen was. Since Zhang Yichen wasn't here, the two of them went back to their own things. They changed again and went back to the hot spring. This time, those people didn't come looking for them. Zhang Yichen didn't come back either. The two of them could quietly soak in the hot spring. Shi Mengwan was soaking in the hot spring, enjoying the steam. She couldn't help but ask curiously. What kind of uncle is this? He looks so young. He looks like he's in his 30s at most. He's the son of Hu Jiniao's great-aunt. His great-aunt wasn't young when she gave birth to him. So he's about the same age as Hu Jiniao. I see. Shi Mengwan nodded. He's quite handsome. You like him? How about I introduce him to you? No need. Shi Mengwan thought of her phone call with Zhang Hausa. The two of them didn't say a word. They just stayed silent. He didn't speak, so she didn't know what to say. She should have hung up the phone, but she didn't want to. Not only did she not want to, but she also felt that listening to Zhang Hausa's breathing was also very calming and reassuring. Therefore, although they talked on the phone for a long time, they didn't really talk much. Even so, Shi Mengwan only believed in Zhang Hausa. As for other men, she really didn't want to talk about them. Su Qingsang knew that even if she didn't say it, so she didn't ask. After soaking in the hot spring, they rested in the room of the club for the night. When they got up the next morning, the manager of the club brought them breakfast. He apologized again and again for disturbing them the day before. Su Qingsang wasn't a person who wouldn't let others off easily. The other party showed enough sincerity, so she wouldn't make things difficult for them. However, she still had to pretend that she was letting him off lightly for Hu Jiniao's sake. In fact, she was more or less curious. Where on earth had Zhang Yichen been hiding? After all, the other party had sent so many people to look for him, but he disappeared just like that. Thinking about it, it was really impressive. After all, when they went back to their room yesterday, they also observed that there was no more noise. And then they couldn't even hear the sound. That meant that Zhang Yichen must have left safely. After leaving the club and getting into the car, Shi Mengwan patted Su Qingsang on the shoulder and said, "You're good. You're becoming more and more like a rich lady." She was talking about how Su Qingsang coincidentally ran into the man with a mustache in the yard last night when she left the club. Shi Mengwan was hiding to make a phone call, so she naturally didn't know who the man with a mustache was. But Su Qingsang knew. She looked at the man with a cold face. Although there was no dissatisfaction in her eyes, her expression was definitely not good. It seemed that the man with a mustache didn't find Zhang Yichen. His expression didn't change, but she could faintly see the anxiety in his eyes. "Thank you for the compliment." Su Qingsang didn't want to be like this. But she had to keep acting. So that those people wouldn't think about what happened yesterday. More importantly, Zhang Yichen should have passed the test safely. In fact, she believed that even if she wasn't there, Zhang Yichen should have passed the test safely. Su Qingsang didn't want to think about it anymore. She had made up her mind to tell Hu Jiniao sometime. She couldn't have a third. She had met Zhang Yichen a few times in private. Although they didn't do anything, she still wanted Hu Jiniao to know. Su Qingsang had been in Rome City for a long time, but she hadn't been to many places. She wanted to focus on keeping Shi Mengwan company for the rest of the time. Hua Jinyao knew that she was keeping Shi Mengwan company. But Lu Tongjia didn't know that. Seeing that Su Qingsang didn't even come back for the weekend, Lu Tongjia naturally thought that she was dissatisfied with her. That made her even more determined to carry out her plan. She had made a backup plan. This time, she didn't believe that Su Qingsang could survive it. On Saturday, Hua Jinyao was finally free. He took Su Qingsang and Shi Mengwan to play in Rong City for a day. In the evening, he took Su Qingsang and Shi Mengwan to have dinner with his childhood friends. He also introduced Shi Mengwan to Wan Xianyang and the others. Except for Li Junxing, who was still in Lin City, the others were all there. Li Junxing didn't come, but Li Wanyu did. She didn't know what Hua Jinyao said to her last time, but she was much more friendly to Su Qingsang today. For Su Qingsang, this was a good thing. Because there were so many people, it was inevitable that it was a little noisy. Su Qingsang couldn't tell Hua Jinyao about what had happened at the club yesterday. However, there was something else that happened at the party that caught her attention. That was, Wan Xianyang seemed to be interested in Shi Mengwan. When Shi Mengwan entered the door with him, Wan Xianyang stared at her for a long time. After they sat down, he looked in Shi Mengwan's direction from time to time with obvious interest in his eyes. During dinner, he sat next to Shi Mengwan on purpose. Later, when everyone went to the club under their name, Wan Xianyang didn't forget to sit next to Shi Mengwan. He asked her to eat and play. He really made his presence known in front of her. Shi Mengwan knew that these people were Hua Jinyao's friends, so she didn't disrespect them. Even when Wan Xianyang said that he wanted to sing a song with her, she stood up and sang with him. Su Qingsang had always known that Shi Mengwan had a good voice. When her voice came out, Tang Mohun and Qing Xianyun couldn't help but look at her, not to mention Wan Xianyang. Su Qingsang could see that Shi Mengwan had to socialize with Wan Xianyang. However, Wan Xianyang obviously took it to heart. She could naturally trust Hua Jinyao's friends. If Shi Mengwan could really have something with Wan Xianyang, she thought it would be a good thing. However, looking at Shi Mengwan, she clearly didn't see Wan Xianyang as a man who was interested in her. She only saw him as Hua Jinyao's childhood friend. It seemed that there was no possibility between the two of them. But overall, this day's gathering was a joyous one for both the host and the guests. The group of people didn't go home until very late. When they got home, Shi Mengwan was also tired. She didn't intend to be a third wheel to Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao. As soon as she entered the door, she said goodbye and went back to her room to rest. After returning to her room and taking a shower, Su Qingsang took out the hairdryer to dry her hair. Hua Jinyao took the initiative to come over and take the hairdryer from her hand to help her. It wasn't the first time he had done this, so he was very skilled. His big hand stroked Su Qingsang's scalp. She felt very comfortable and even narrowed her eyes. Chapter 505. Su Qingsang opened her eyes and looked at Hua Jinyao through the mirror on the dresser. Hua Jinyao didn't want to be nosy, but before they parted, Wan Xianyang had come to him in private and asked him to ask Su Qingsang what Shi Mengwan thought of him. He had heard about Wan Xianyang's relationship before, but it had been more than a year since he broke up with his last girlfriend. It was rare for him to be interested in a woman, and she was Su Qingsang's friend, so Hua Jinyao didn't mind talking to her. I don't think so. Su Qingsang knew Shi Mengwan best. She has someone she likes. She won't be with Wan Xianyang. Wan Xianyang wasn't bad looking. He wasn't as handsome as Hua Jinyao, nor was he as masculine as Zhang Yichen. However, he looked fair, gentle, and clean. He was the kind of fresh meat that people admired nowadays, but she knew that he wasn't Shi Mengwan's type. She has such high standards. Wan Xianying's family was not bad. Most importantly, Wan Xianying's aunt had wanted Wan Xianying to marry for a long time. If they were really interested in each other, Wu Jinyao thought it would be a good thing. After all, Shi Mengwan was a nice person, even though she always tried to steal his wife. It's not that she has high standards. Su Qingsang thought about it and decided to tell Wu Jinyao. Mengwan likes someone like Zhang Haoze. Don't try to pull strings. Zhang Haoze. Of course Wu Jinyao knew Zhang Haoze. They had met before. Thinking about Zhang Haoze, Wu Jinyao frowned. Zhang Haoze is engaged, right? Yes. So they have no chance. But even if they had no chance, Shi Mengwan wouldn't change her mind to like someone else. Since they have no chance, let's try with Xianying. Xianying is a nice person, and he's not a playboy. Compared with other people in Rong City, he's clean and honest. By other people, Wu Jinyao was referring to his cousin, Lu Lixian, who wasn't very reliable. I'll ask. But my intuition tells me that she has no chance with Xianying. When her hair was almost dry, Su Qingsang turned to look at Wu Jinyao. Jinyao, I forgot to tell you something. What? It was rare for Wu Jinyao to see her so serious. Don't tell me you also have someone you like outside. Su Qingsang glared at him and ignored his joke. The hot spring club that you asked me to go to. Are you familiar with the boss inside? Not really. Wu Jinyao was telling the truth. He worked with Tianyu Group once before. But it would only happen once. Later, I heard that his background wasn't very clean, so we didn't work together anymore. As the president of Tianyu Group, Wu Jinyao was quite picky about his collaborators. It was said that the owner of the club was quite powerful. But that background was probably a little shady. Usually, the two families minded their own business. Later, he spent a lot of money to build his hot spring club. Naturally, he invited Wu Jinyao. For the sake of their previous cooperation, Wu Jinyao went there once. The other party was also very happy and gave him a gold card. There were too many such favors, so when he came back, he just casually left it there. If it weren't for the fact that Shi Mengwan had come to visit Su Qingsang this time, Su Qingsang wouldn't have let her go. He would never have thought that there was such a place to go. So you're not familiar with him? Yes, I'm not familiar with him. Hui Yangyuan, Wu Jinyao's great uncle, was an official. He could be called a high-ranking official. Wu Jinyao's great-uncle was also a military commander. The Hu family was very cautious. They would never let themselves make mistakes. They would not let others gossip about them. Since they knew that the other party's background was a little awkward, they naturally wouldn't rush to make friends with him. But the Hu family wouldn't be afraid of them. What's wrong? Didn't you have fun there? It's not that I wasn't happy. Su Qingsang blinked and told him about her encounter with Zhang Yichen. After all, it was a big deal in the club. If the owner of the club told Wu Jinyao about it in the future, she wanted him to know. She was also worried that if the owner of the club was really a shady person, Wu Jinyao wouldn't be able to guard against him. Is that so? Zhang Yichen wouldn't easily appear in that kind of place. Wu Jinyao's mind was working fast. He thought of some rumors he had heard before. Let's not go to that place next time. Of course we won't go there again. Since Wu Jinyao said so, Su Qingsang wasn't stupid. She wouldn't go there again. I just wanted to tell you. I didn't offend anyone openly. But at that time, I still used your power to suppress them. I'm afraid that they will cause you trouble later. Wu Jinyao put his arms around her waist. He enjoyed the care and worry in her eyes. Honey, why do you care about me so much? Su Qingsang blushed a little. He was her husband. If she didn't care about him, who would she care about? Honey, why do you care about me so much? Hua Jinyao suddenly became serious again. He put his face close to Su Qingsang's. Honey, I'm so touched. Su Qingsang couldn't stand it anymore. She took a step back to avoid his face. His hands were still on her waist. She couldn't move away at all. She put her hands on his chest and said uncomfortably, anyway, I mean, you should be careful. She didn't want to cause trouble for Hua Jinyao. But if trouble really came, she could only brace herself and face it. After all, in that situation, I had no choice but to use your identity to suppress them. Fortunately, it was fine. But then where did your uncle go? What did he do? I don't know. Anyway, when we got changed and came out, he was gone. Thinking of the mustache man's face the next morning, he should have passed, right? Don't worry, honey. They won't be so stupid to provoke me. It would be fine if they didn't provoke him, but if they really did provoke him. Even if that person had a powerful background, so what? He wasn't afraid. Next time something like this happens, just use my identity. Hua Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang with an indulgent expression on his face. Don't be polite to those people. Just tell them who you are. If there were still people who were stupid enough to make Su Qingsang unhappy, then he wouldn't be polite. Su Qingsang was a little touched when she heard that. The feeling of having someone behind her was really good. But after thinking about it, she reached out and gently poked Hua Jinyao's chest. Do you think I cause trouble outside every day? This time, it was purely an accident. If it weren't for my uncle suddenly rushing in, I would still be in the hot spring. Thinking of Zhang Yichen, Su Qingsang remembered how she was almost disheveled when he broke in. Chapter 506. She didn't want Hua Jinyao to continue the topic, so she thought of something else. Speaking of which, your uncle's family isn't bad. Why did he have to do these dangerous things? If he didn't do these dangerous things, how could he have been promoted to senior colonel in such a short time? Hua Jinyao admired Zhang Yichen very much. They had a good relationship, so he understood Zhang Yichen's choice. His uncle was already a commander. If Zhang Yichen had been relying on his father's influence, it wouldn't have been a problem. However, Zhang Yichen was obviously ambitious, so he had to work harder than others, so that people wouldn't think that he got to where he was because of his connections. Oh, right. What do you mean by uncle? Isn't my uncle your uncle? Su Qingsang stuck out her tongue. She couldn't tell him that Zhang Yichen looked too young. She wouldn't even think of the fact that he was one generation younger than her. Hua Jinyao suddenly narrowed his eyes, turned her body around, and moved closer to her face. You just said that my uncle saw you in the hot spring. Since she was in the hot spring, she wasn't wearing any clothes, was she? Hua Jinyao's face was so close that the tip of his nose almost touched hers. Su Qingsang blinked and looked into Hua Jinyao's deep eyes. That was an accident. Accident? Hua Jinyao put his hand on her shoulder and asked, did he see you naked? His voice was not only obviously jealous, but Su Qingsang could also hear the danger in it. Looking at his enlarged face, she shook her head instinctively and said, no, I was wearing a swimsuit. Swimsuit? Which one? One-piece style? Or three-point style? Hua Jinyao said the last few words in a very low voice. His breath was warm with a cool mint smell. Su Qingsang blushed slowly and said, three-point style. Hua Jinyao narrowed his eyes and stared at Su Qingsang's face. He suddenly pulled her up and led her to the walk-in closet. Then he leaned against the door and looked at her. Su Qingsang didn't understand what he meant. She blinked and stood there without moving. Hurry up. His gaze was fervent, and there was a hint of impatience in his eyes. What? Find your swimsuit and put it on. She didn't know, but Hu Jinyao didn't mind reminding her. Speaking of which, I've never seen you wear a bikini. Previously, when she went to Japan to soak in the hot springs, he said he wanted to go with her. Later, he had something to do and couldn't make it. This time, she brought Shi Mengwan to the hot spring club. He thought that it would be inconvenient for him to follow them since they were both women, so he didn't go. Speaking of which, he had never seen Su Qingsang in a swimsuit. Hu Jinyao. Su Qingsang didn't want to talk to this guy. She walked past him and was about to walk out when Hu Jinyao put his arm around her waist. With a twist, he easily fixed her body on the closet door of the cloakroom. Find it yourself and change it, or I'll help you. Choose one. I won't choose either. Su Qingsang shook her head. Even though she was blushing all the way to her neck, she didn't intend to compromise just like that. I'm sleepy. I'm going to bed. It's not like you're going swimming, so why are you wearing a swimsuit for him to see? He was going crazy, and she wasn't going to go crazy with him. Hu Jinyao nodded. It seems that you're more inclined to let me do it. As he spoke, he held her waist tightly, not giving her a chance to run out. He rummaged through her wardrobe. She had brought some luggage to Rome City, but not much. All the clothes in this closet were bought by him later. Naturally, there were swimsuits among them. After all, the Hu family had a swimming pool. Hu Jinyao casually rummaged through and found several sets. There were all kinds of colors and styles. I'll take this one. Taking out a pink swimsuit, Hu Jinyao glanced at Su Qingsang's body up and down. Come on, put it on. Hu Jinyao, that's enough. She wasn't going to the swimming pool now, so why would she wear a swimsuit? Well, since you don't want to, then I have to do it myself. Hu Jinyao wasn't joking with her. He was serious. How could Su Qingsang let him do it? She took a big step back. No. I'll do it myself. Hu Jinyao gestured for her to do it. With a smile on his face, he looked at Su Qingsang with eager eyes. Su Qingsang felt uncomfortable under his gaze, and her eyes fell on the cloth in his hand. She gritted her teeth and finally took it. She was wearing pajamas, so she had to take them off to change into the swimsuit. She had undressed in front of Hu Jinyao before, but most of the time, he was the one doing it. Speaking of which, it was almost the first time that she took the initiative to do it in front of him. Thinking of this, Su Qingsang became more and more uncomfortable, and even felt a little weak in her legs. Hu Jinyao's eyes were still staring at her, and there seemed to be a faint spark in his eyes. When she took off her pajamas, the spark in his eyes turned into flames. Su Qingsang felt a little thirsty. She let the pajamas slide to the ground, and finally put on the small piece of cloth with trembling hands. Her movements weren't fast, but being stared at by him, even if he was her husband and they had been intimate so many times, still made her feel embarrassed. Hu Jinyao watched Su Qingsang put on the bikini, and the flames in his eyes turned into flames. Su Qingsang tied the strap behind her, only to find that Hu Jinyao had been staring at her. She suddenly had a feeling that she didn't know where to put her hands and feet. She couldn't help but take a step back, and her body hit the door of the wardrobe behind her. Hu Jinyao took a step forward and stood still. He stared at her face, and his eyes were burning. I've already put it on for you to see. Su Qingsang's voice was a little hoarse. She blinked and wanted to move aside. Excuse me, I'm going to sleep. Hu Jinyao was like a big bad wolf staring at a little white rabbit, and his eyes were almost glowing red. How could he let her go like this? Honey. He put one hand on the side of her neck, and his tall body made it impossible for her to hide. Did you want Zhang Yichen to see you like this today? Why did he beat Zhang Yichen up? Shouldn't he hide somewhere? Hide in the hot spring where Su Qingsang was. He really deserved a beating. I told you, it was an accident. It was an accident, but when he thought of Zhang Yichen looking at Su Qingsang's seductive face, he felt a little uncomfortable. Of course, he trusted Zhang Yichen's character. He came from the army, and he was a man of integrity. He had heard from his great-aunt that a new female soldier who had just joined the army had a crush on Zhang Yichen. The sky was swaying in front of Zhang Yichen. However, Zhang Yichen didn't move. Later, that female soldier somehow got the courage to walk up to Zhang Yichen and take off her clothes, trying to make it a reality. However, Zhang Yichen ignored the female soldier's attempt to throw herself into his arms and directly threw her out of the room. Of course, when he threw her out, he still cared about her face and threw her clothes out. Although the female soldier hurriedly put on her clothes, she still couldn't suppress the matter. Later, that female soldier was transferred away. Maybe she was directly discharged from the army. Zhang Yichen had been in this kind of situation many times. In addition, in the past few years, he seemed to be focused on building his career, and he didn't care much about women. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in his 30s without a girlfriend and didn't want to get married. As Hu Jinyao was thinking about this, his eyes fell on Su Qingsang's chest. He suddenly felt his throat tighten. How could those mediocre women be compared to Su Qingsang? Su Qingsang was Su Qingsang, and those people were those people. Lowering his head, he bit down on her lips, neither too lightly nor too heavily. Su Qingsang felt the pain and let out a moan. To Hu Jinyao, this moan was like pouring oil on the fire in his eyes. Right on the wardrobe door, he pressed her body down and kissed her hard. Su Qingsang's back was against the wardrobe door, and she only felt cold. She was afraid of the cold, so she held Hu Jinyao with both hands and tried to move forward a little. Hu Jinyao narrowed his eyes and picked her up. She looked like she was throwing herself into his arms. The moment her body was in the air, Su Qingsang was so scared that she held Hu Jinyao's neck tightly. Hu Jinyao stared at her snow-white breasts in front of him, and his eyes darkened. Against her neck, he said in a nasal voice, "Wife, you are mine." Her body, and everything about her belonged to him. He didn't want any other man to touch her. Even if that man was his uncle, it was the same. Hu Jinyao looked at Yang Wenchang in front of him and narrowed his eyes. What did you say? He Xianyao, the daughter of the He family, came to the company yesterday. Who agreed? It wasn't me. Yang Wenchang was afraid that Hu Jinyao would think of him. The chairman arranged it. My father. Yes. Yang Wenchang looked at Hu Jinyao's face and said carefully, she was arranged to replace Zhang Yang, but I didn't agree. Later, she said she would go to the marketing department. We let her go. She said she would go to the marketing department, and you let her go. Hu Jinyao raised his eyebrows, his eyes sharp. Yang Wenchang lowered his head again, and his eyes were full of guilt. Well, the chairman. Hu Jinyao didn't say anything. This was not Hu Mingguang's idea, but Lu Tongjia's. It's okay. She wants to stay in the marketing department, right? It's okay. Starting tomorrow, let her work with old Zhang in the marketing department. Whatever old Zhang does, we'll do it together with her. Yang Wenchang's eyes lit up. His boss had made a smart move. President Hua, why didn't I think of this before? Do you think that the one who came is an ancestor and we have to worship her? Hu Jinyao and Yang Wenchang had worked together for many years and had a tacit understanding. However, Yang Wenchang had to listen to Hu Mingguang sometimes. After all, Hua Mingguang was the chairman. Hua Ji now understood Yang Wenchang's position, but he wouldn't let it go. Chapter 507. Hua Jinyao's voice sounded deliberate. He had already decided to forget about He Xianyao setting him up. Since she was so blind and wanted to come looking for trouble, Lin Fan thought to himself. She shouldn't blame him for making her unhappy. Yes. Yang Wenchang nodded. He looked like he was watching a good show. Originally, he wanted to leave, but he suddenly thought of something else. President Hua, there's something I think I should tell you. About the Ike's case. Yes. The case has been going well, but there seems to be a problem with the signing. The signing has been delayed for a few days. Normally, the contract should have been signed by now. With Hui Yifan's ability, it shouldn't have been delayed for so long. Yang Wenchang began to feel that something was wrong. What's the problem? Hua Jinyao looked at Yang Wenchang. Before he could ask him to clarify the problem, Yang Wenchang's phone rang. He glanced at Hua Jinyao. It's Micah, the representative from Ike's. Meeting Hua Jinyao's eyes, he quickly picked up the phone. He looked at Hua Jinyao and spoke to the other party in English while putting the phone on speaker. Hua Jinyao could hear the voice on the other end of the phone clearly. Micah wanted to meet him. Yang Wenchang signaled with his eyes whether he could agree or not. Hua Jinyao shook his head. Yang Wenchang understood immediately. He told the other party that Hua Jinyao wouldn't be free for the next 2 days. As for when they could meet, it would depend on when Hua Jinyao was free. After hanging up, Yang Wenchang looked confused. President Hua, what do you think is going on with Hua Yifan? He had worked for Hua Jinyao for many years. Naturally, he knew that Hua Yifan didn't get along with Hua Jinyao. As for why he didn't want to replace him, it was because he didn't want Hua Jinyao to be the president. Don't worry about him. If Micah wants to meet me again, say yes. Okay. Yang Wenchang understood. What about Hua Yifan? Ignore him. As long as Micah made a move, Hua Yifan wouldn't be able to sit still. Yang Wenchang would know what Micah wanted. Yes. Yang Wenchang picked up the documents and was about to leave when he remembered one last thing. By the way, President Hua, the temporary replacement for Zhang Yang, has passed the interview. Her name is Ding Qing, and she's a top student at T University. She started working today. You deal with these matters. There's no need to tell me. Yang Wenchang responded and left. Hua Jinyao was lost in thought. Based on Hui Yifan's cunning, even if he couldn't get Ike's deal in the shortest time possible, he wouldn't have dragged it on for so long. More importantly, there was no way IX would come back to him. After all, if he couldn't complete this project well, his position in the Tianyu group would be awkward in the end. Even Hua Mingguang couldn't say anything. Was Hui Yifan really that stupid? Or did he have other tricks up his sleeve? No matter which one it was, he wasn't afraid. He would just deal with it as it came. There was another knock on the door. Hua Jinyao looked unhappy. The person who came was Su Qingsang. This was her first time visiting the Tianyu group in Rong City. If she hadn't met Yang Wenchang just now, she wouldn't have been able to come up. After all, she was the wife of the president of the Tianyu group. Many people had only heard of her, but never met her. Why are you here? Seeing Su Qingsang, Hua Jinyao stood up to greet her. Mengwan and I happened to be shopping nearby, so I thought I'd come to see you. What? So you came to see me on the way? Hua Jinyao raised his hand to cover his chest, looking hurt. Honey, I'm hurt. Seeing him like this, Su Qingsang wanted to laugh. She raised the small box in her hand and said, Since you're hurt, I guess you can't have dessert, right? Can I give it to someone else? No. His wife bought it for him. Even if he didn't like sweets, he couldn't let it fall into someone else's hands. Hua Jinyao took the box from her hand and put it on the coffee table. He put it on the coffee table and said, "Hey, didn't you say you came with Shi Mengwan? Where is she?" She went to the bathroom. She had never been to Hua Jinyao's workplace, so she brought Shi Mengwan here. Good timing. Let's have dinner together tonight. Hua Jinyao received a call from Wan Xianyang today. Xianyang said he wants to treat you to dinner. Treating me is fake. It's Mengwan, right? Su Qingsang blinked. Did he think she didn't know what Wan Xianyang was thinking? Then will you do me the honor? I will, but it's really impossible for him and Mengwan to be together. Su Qingsang had already asked Shi Mengwan today, and she didn't mean that. Besides, she's leaving tomorrow. Leaving tomorrow. Why don't you stay for a few more days? I have to work, and I can't be with her every day. She also has things to do in Lin City. So she and Xianyang are destined not to be together. As Su Qingsang spoke, her phone rang. Shi Mengwan was already ready and waiting for her downstairs. I'll leave first. Let's talk about dinner later. Since it was impossible for them to be together, it was better not to give him hope. When Su Qingsang left, she pointed at the snacks on the coffee table and blew a kiss at Hua Jinyao. Seeing his eyes suddenly become deep, she immediately became timid and quickly walked out. Su Qingsang walked out of the office. Before she reached the elevator, she saw a beautiful woman walking toward her. She was a real beauty. She was about 170 centimeters tall, had a slim figure, a voluptuous body, beautiful facial features, and exquisite makeup. She was wearing a pair of Gucci high heels and a Chanel business suit. She didn't have a special concept of brands. However, she happened to see the woman in front of her in a magazine when she went to the spa a few days ago. Su Qingsang blinked. There was such a beauty in Hua Jinyao's office. How good were the benefits of Tianyu Group? The woman was holding a stack of documents in her hand. She looked like a standard elite office woman. She was looking at the woman, and the woman was looking at her. Su Qingsang wanted to go out with Shi Mengwan. She came out in sportswear. She looked casual and casual. Although Su Qingsang didn't feel that she was inferior to the woman in front of her, she felt that she lacked a sense of formality and solemnity. Su Qingsang also felt strange when she realized her own mentality. What was even stranger was that Su Qingsang didn't know if it was an illusion, but she seemed to see a flash of contempt in the woman's eyes. She wanted to see it clearly, but the woman curled the corners of her lips and smiled at her. She didn't speak, but took the stack of documents, walked past her, and walked toward Hua Jinyao's office. Chapter 508. Su Qingsang suddenly turned to look at her. She still had a faint smile on her lips. Before Su Qingsang could say anything, she waved the folder in her hand and went straight into Hua Jinyao's office. Before entering the door, the moment she pushed it open, she turned to look at Su Qingsang. When their eyes met, she silently said 4 words. Open the door and close it. Just like that, the graceful figure disappeared behind the door. Su Qingsang's expression became a little strange. It was her first time in Hua Jinyao's office. When Yang Wenchang took her upstairs just now, they took the elevator for the president. She didn't meet anyone, so how did this woman know her identity? Qingsang. What's wrong? Shi Mengwan's words brought her back to reality. Only then did she realize that she had already left the building of Tianyu Group and had already reached the parking lot. Nothing. Su Qingsang shook her head. Thinking of the last few words that her daughter had uttered, she suddenly felt a sense of provocation. Who was that woman? What did she mean by those words? TSK, I know you and Hu Jinyao are very loving. You don't have to look like this when you leave him, do you? After all, you two are together every day now. Shi Mengwan was quite dissatisfied with her absent-mindedness. I haven't even gone up and let you two be alone. Why are you still so reluctant to leave? I'm so jealous. What are you talking about? Su Qingsang was amused by her words. It's not that I can't bear to leave him. I just remembered that Hu Jinyao doesn't seem to like desserts. In the end, I sent 2 boxes of desserts up. She had been shopping with Shi Mengwan and happened to walk near the dessert shop, so she bought desserts. Later, she remembered that she had gone out to eat with Hu Jinyao a few times, and she had never seen him eat desserts at the Hu family. You're a little incompetent as a wife. Shi Mengwan's words were teasing. You don't even know what your husband likes to eat. Who said that? I know. I just forgot. Su Qingsang blushed a little. She had really forgotten about it because she was shopping. I think you should be more careful in the future. Otherwise, your husband is so handsome and has such a high status. If a girl comes and snatches him away one day, you won't even have a place to cry. Screw you. Mai Jinyao wouldn't do that. Su Qingsang was sure, but she couldn't help but think of the woman she had just seen upstairs. Somehow, she felt a little uncomfortable in her heart. Mai Jinyao. TSK, your words are so sour. Shi Mengwan's voice brought her back to her senses. She shook off that thought. She believed in Hu Jinyao's character. He would never betray his love and marriage. Inexplicably, this was what she believed. With such confidence, she didn't ask Hu Jinyao who the woman was that night. There was no need to ask, and there was no need to know. Since she chose to trust him, there was no need for her to ask anything else. Because Shi Mengwan was about to leave, she slept with Shi Mengwan that night. As for Hu Jinyao's dark expression, she instinctively ignored it. The next day, Su Qingsang sent Shi Mengwan off, returned to the hospital, and continued to do what she was supposed to do. The courtyard became busy. For a few days, it was as if a wave of people were rushing to give birth. Every day, they had to receive a large number of pregnant women. The ward was almost full. Not only were they busy, but there were also a few pregnant women who weren't in good condition, so they had to pay attention to them from time to time. Not to mention her, even Jing Qinyu was very busy. Some pregnant women were picky and said that they didn't want male doctors, but when there were no doctors, male doctors were also useful. Under such circumstances, when the next weekend came, Su Qingsang naturally didn't go back to the Hu family. She could only call old Master Hua and tell him that she had to be on duty this weekend, so she might not be able to see him. Old Master Hua was very understanding about his granddaughter-in-law's work. He didn't say much, but just told her to work hard. Hu Jinyao looked at Micah, who was sitting in front of him. Next to him was his secretary, Vera. This time, Hu Jinyao brought Yang Wenchang with him. They had been sitting for 20 minutes. Micah didn't open the door, but Hu Jinyao was calm. He was leisurely drinking the tea in front of him. The tea is good. Hu Jinyao glanced at Yang Wenchang, who was sitting next to him, with appreciation. Try it. His attitude was a little frivolous. Micah was angry, but he didn't show it on his face. President Hua, you still have the leisure to drink tea. I thought you wouldn't even be able to eat now. Why would I? Hu Jinyao smiled. Why would I not be able to eat? President Hua. Micah thought that Hu Jinyao was pretending. In his opinion, how could Hu Jinyao not care about it at all? That was impossible. You were the one who talked to me about the cooperation between our two companies. Why is it Mr. Hui Yifan now? No matter who I talk to, the final result is the cooperation with Tianyu Group. I don't see the difference. Of course there is a difference. Micah looked at Hu Jinao, as if feeling sorry for him. President Hu, we had a good talk before. I thought you were willing to cooperate with me. Yes. Tianyu Group is willing to cooperate with Ix at any time. Hu Jinao was talking about the two companies, but Micah was talking about the two of them. Micah wasn't stupid. Of course, he understood. President Hu, I don't think you are willing to give such a big piece of the cake to your brother. You said it yourself, he is my brother. If that's the case, why do we have to be separate? But Tianyu Group should be yours. Micah looked sad. Isn't it? Mr. Micah, please be careful. Tianyu Group belongs to the Hu family. But without your father, the Hu family wouldn't be where it is now. Hu Jinao didn't deny this. Why could Hu Mingguang become the chairman, while Hu Mingliang could only be a director, which was an idle job? When Tianyu Group was first established, it couldn't be on such a scale. Although Old Master Hu was ruthless, he only made Tianyu Group the largest in Rong City. After Hu Mingguang took over, he expanded the business to other cities in the country. He also laid the foundation for Tianyu Group to become a multinational company. After that, Hu Jinao took over. After he took over, he made a series of measures to make Tianyu Group stronger. Hu Jinao understood what Micah meant. Seriously speaking, he and Hu Mingguang should be the only ones in Tianyu Group. Of course, it was the same now. However, after Hu Yifan graduated from school and entered Tianyu Group, he started to have more thoughts with Hu Yang and Hu Yifan. They did a lot of small things, but Hu Mingguang tolerated them all. Because of this, Hu Jinao had a lot of troubles. Mr. Micah, what are you trying to say? Just say it. If you want to sow discord between me and my brother, you don't have to. In some ways, I trust him. Even if he didn't trust him, it was the Hu family's business. He wouldn't show it in front of Micah, a collaborator, or a foreigner. Mr. Hu, I can't be compared to you. Micah sighed. He seemed to be helpless about Hu Jinao's words. Mr. Hu, I sincerely want to cooperate with you, but I know some small things. I think Mr. Hu will be very interested in them. Micah didn't beat around the bush. He got to the point. Hu Jinao looked at him. Because of what Micah said next, his expression finally changed. It was rare that Su Qingsang didn't have to be on duty or stay in the hospital. She bought some bird food to feed the parrot, then bought 2 boxes of tea to visit Old Master Hu. She had heard from Hu Jinao that Old Master Hu loved tea. The Hu family must have good tea. They had a lot of special tea. But the tea she gave him would be different. It was an apology for not having time to visit Old Master Hu. Old Master Hu was really nice to her and trusted her. Su Qingsang was very grateful. If she could, she would like to spend more time with Old Master Hu. However, when Su Qingsang arrived at the Hu family's house, she found that Old Master Hu had gone out to see an old friend. He would come back later. As for how late, Uncle Qing didn't know if he would come back for dinner. Su Qingsang finally decided to visit the parrot before going home. Old Master Hu wasn't there, so Su Qingsang couldn't stay. The main thing was that if she ran into Lu Tongjia later, they wouldn't quarrel, but they never had a good conversation when they met. Therefore, she didn't want to be impulsive. Su Qingsang stood under the eaves in the backyard. Rome City was getting warmer. The temperature wasn't high, but at least it wasn't as cold as before. The parrot seemed to be very happy to see her and kept squawking. But even if it was happy, the parrot had to express its dissatisfaction. Bastard, don't look at me. Bastard, ignore me. Su Qingsang was so angry that she wanted to laugh. It was the bird who had been cold and ignored her no matter how she called. Why was she ignoring it now? What was even funnier was that it was complaining, but it still scolded her. I think you shouldn't be called Jadeite. Change it to rascal. You like scolding people so much. Rascal, you rascal. Rascal. You rascal. The parrot scolded her again. Su Qingsang really laughed. Why was the bird getting addicted to scolding her? Su Qingsang rarely got playful. She glared at the bird in front of her fiercely. You're having fun, aren't you? Believe it or not, I'll pluck all your feathers, kill you, and eat you. Bad guy, bad guy. The parrot squawked even louder. Boss. Help. Bad guy. He wants to eat me. Boss, help. Help, ha ha ha. Su Qingsang couldn't help but laugh out loud. She was overjoyed. The bird was so funny. She didn't laugh for long before she heard low laughter behind her. Chapter 509. Uncle. Su Qingsang blinked and looked at the person in front of her. She found that she had been seeing Zhang Yichen more often recently. But it didn't seem to be a coincidence. After all, the whole family was Zhang Yichen's uncle's home. He could come and go as he pleased without any scruples. Zhang Yichen looked at Su Qingsang and responded to the word uncle in a very casual tone. He seemed to be smiling just now. The corners of his mouth were still curled up, with a faint, shallow smile. Su Qingsang wasn't sure how much of her conversation with the parrot he had heard. Somehow, she felt a little embarrassed. It seemed that whenever she appeared in front of him, she wouldn't look good. Uncle, are you here for Grandpa? Grandpa went out. He's not home. I know. Zhang Yichen was here for old Master Hua. He didn't know until later that Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao only came to the Hua family's house on weekends. He wanted to avoid Su Qingsang when she came. Unexpectedly, he didn't manage to avoid her. He didn't expect Su Qingsang to be at home. Not only was she at home, but she was also playing with the parrot in the backyard. When she smiled, there was a hint of innocence and frankness in it. She didn't have the arrogance that other girls in Rong City had. She looked as cute as a girl next door. But he knew that was only one side of her. She had many other sides. She was cunning when she was trying to blackmail the family members, and she was serious when she was stitching up people's wounds. And she was arrogant and aggressive when she was facing that man's subordinates. The last thing that flashed through his mind was Su Qingsang's smooth shoulders that were half exposed when she was soaking in the hot spring, and her jade-like skin. Realizing what he was thinking, he put on a serious expression, and the smile on his face faded a little. He looked so serious that Su Qingsang thought he didn't want to see her. Well, she was the one who saw him hiding in the closet in a sorry state. Then, Uncle, please help yourself. I'm leaving. She was about to walk into the house when Zhang Yichen suddenly stopped her when she was about to walk past him. Don't move. Su Qingsang was startled and subconsciously glanced at him. Zhang Yichen realized that his tone was too stiff. He lowered his voice uncomfortably and said, "There's something dirty." Where? Don't move. Zhang Yichen raised his hand and gently plucked a feather out of her hair. She looked at him with hidden eagerness in her eyes. However, the corners of his lips were tightly pursed. That was the result of him trying his best to restrain himself. Su Qingsang didn't see the look on Zhang Yichen's face. When he brought the feather to her, she lowered her head and said, "Thank you." The corners of Zhang Yichen's mouth were cold and stiff. Even his voice was lower. No need. Su Qingsang didn't stay long because of his cold attitude. She left as fast as she could. Zhang Yichen stood there without moving. After Su Qingsang left, the expression on his face relaxed a little. He closed his eyes and sniffed. There was still the faint fragrance of Su Qingsang in the air. Zhang Yichen abruptly opened his eyes and looked at a spot in the garden. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he keenly sensed that someone was spying on him just now. The feeling of being watched was very obvious. If he hadn't been distracted just now, he would have realized it. Zhang Yichen's expression was serious. He stared in that direction for a long time, but the feeling disappeared. His face darkened slightly. He suddenly realized that he had been too careless. He should have been more careful not to let anyone see anything. After all, he could restrain that little bit of lustful thoughts. But was it really just a little bit? They had only met a few times, and they had only interacted for a short time. But he couldn't help but think about it. If only she wasn't Hu Jinyao's wife. If only she hadn't gotten married so early. He even thought that if the person she married was him, would she also show such a gentle smile in front of him, with a tinge of shyness? Closing his eyes, Zhang Yichen suppressed this crazy thought in time. He clenched his fists so tightly that the veins on the back of his hands were bulging. He couldn't think about it anymore. If someone found out about it, it wouldn't end well for him and Su Qingsang. Zhang Yichen glanced at the place again, thinking about the possibility of who was there. Finally, he turned and left. When Su Qingsang got home, she found that Hu Jinyao had come home earlier than her. She was a little surprised. Ms. Yu was cooking in the kitchen, while Hu Jinyao was sitting on a chair on the balcony. It was so cold outside, but he didn't come in. He didn't notice that she was back. Su Qingsang frowned, put down the things, changed her shoes, and walked out. Jinyao. Hu Jinyao turned around and smiled when he saw Su Qingsang. You're back. Su Qingsang blinked and looked at him. The lights on the balcony were off. She seemed to have seen a flash of gloominess in Hu Jinyao's eyes. But now, he was only looking at her with a faint smile, as if that emotion just now was her illusion. Are you okay? I'm fine. Why did you come out here to stand in the cold wind alone? The heating in Rome City hadn't been turned off yet, so it was very cold outside. She felt cold even standing there, not to mention how long he had been standing in the cold wind. Su Qingsang suddenly reached out and held his hand. She found that his hand was not as warm as it used to be. Instead, it was ice cold. Su Qingsang glared at him. Hu Jinyao, you call this okay? The concern in her eyes was real. Hu Jinyao looked at her and suddenly reached out to pull her into his arms. Su Qingsang was stunned for a second, then hugged him with both hands around his waist. His clothes were cold from the wind. She leaned her face against it, feeling a little uncomfortable from the coldness. Hu Jinyao. She didn't look up, but slightly tightened her arms. I'm your wife. You can tell me if you need anything. Yes. Maybe I can't help you with your business. I can't even help you with other things. But at least I can listen. Su Qingsang's voice was very soft, but it sounded in the dark night. Hu Jinyao was still silent. He couldn't say it. He looked at Su Qingsang and thought about what Micah said in the afternoon. He couldn't say it. He couldn't tell Su Qingsang that his mother, his father, his cousin, and his uncle, almost everyone didn't want him to live well. Hu Jinyao closed his eyes and rested his chin on the top of Su Qingsang's head. There was a light fragrance in her hair, and he felt that the smell was very comfortable. Her body was very soft. Compared to his figure, it was delicate and soft. Hugging her in his arms, it made his heart soften. Chapter 5:10. Su Qingsang looked up at him with her clear eyes. If there was moonlight, he could see his shadow in her eyes. But even without moonlight, Hu Jinyao knew that her eyes were full of him. His heart moved slightly, but he didn't respond to her words. Hu Jinyao, if you don't want to tell me, I won't ask. But I hope you understand. We are husband and wife. Since we are husband and wife, we are one. You can try talking to me too. He tried to trust her and tell her about his troubles. She might not be able to help. But at least there was someone to share his worries with and listen to him. Hu Jinyao's response was to reach out and hug her tightly. Ms. Yu's voice came from inside. Dinner was ready. Su Qingsang patted Hu Jinyao's back and said, "Let's go. Let's go eat." Hu Jinyao let go of her and looked at Su Qingsang's beautiful face. He lowered his head and planted a light kiss on her forehead. "Don't worry. I'm fine." Su Qingsang didn't believe him, but since he said so, she could only believe him. She felt a little disappointed in her heart that she didn't even know about. She was almost a blank piece of paper in front of him. Whether it was her family background or her thoughts, everything was under his control. He knew everything clearly. But she felt that he still had secrets, things that he didn't want to share with her. That didn't feel good. She thought that maybe he really didn't want to tell her because of work, or maybe because she wouldn't understand even if he told her. That little bit of discomfort was suppressed in a corner of her heart and became a small seed. Hu Jinyao looked at the documents handed to him by the person in front of him and glanced at her. Ding Qing, the new female secretary, was here to replace Zhang Yang. She graduated from MIT, had a good education background, and had a very good resume. Such a talent came to Tianyu Group as a secretary. It didn't mean that Tianyu Group's secretaries were bad. It was because with Ding Qing's resume, she could get a better position. However, Hu Jinyao later watched the video of her interview and the reason why she came to apply for the job. According to her, her mother had been in poor health recently, so she wanted to come back and spend more time with her. Another reason was that Hu Jinyao had worked with the company she used to work for. She liked the way Hu Jinyao's company did things, and she hoped to learn new things from Tianyu Group. She had been in the company for more than a week, and her performance was indeed quite outstanding. Not only was she able to do the things that Yang Wenchang arranged for her, but there were also some things that she could do well even without his arrangement. Usually, Hu Jinyao didn't use female secretaries. However, Ding Qing was indeed very capable. Therefore, 1 week was enough for him to change his mind about replacing her. Ding Qing stood there, looking a little nervous. He looked at Hu Jinyao with uncertainty in his eyes. "President Hua, are the documents all right?" "No." Hu Jinyao withdrew his gaze, signed the document, and handed it to her. "Zhang Yang will go on vacation in 2 days. Tell him to hand over the rest of the work to you." "Yes. I know. Zhang Yang has told me what to do." Ding Qing smiled and held the document in her hands in front of her chest. It seemed that the document was a little lower than her chest. Because of that, the 2 lumps in her chest seemed to be completely squeezed together. Hu Jinyao didn't see that, but Ding Qing looked at Hu Jinyao's eyes with concern. "President Hua, you don't look so good. Did you not sleep well yesterday? Do you want me to make you a cup of coffee?" "Sure." Hu Jinyao did not sleep well yesterday. He didn't know if it was because of what Micah said, but he had been having nightmares these days. He rubbed between his eyebrows and signaled Ding Qing to leave. A few minutes after Ding Qing left, she came back with a cup of coffee in her hand. There was a small piece of cake on top of it. "President Hua, I don't think it's good to drink coffee on an empty stomach. Have a piece of cake." Hua Jinyao glanced at Ding Qing. Her eyes were very calm. President Hua, take care of yourself. I'm still waiting to learn from you. Hua Jinyao looked at her calmness and didn't think much of it. Thank you. But I don't like cake. Oh, really? Ding Qing seemed to be very upset. I saw a box of desserts in your office last time. My wife bought it. What he meant was obvious. Since Su Qingsang bought it, even if she didn't like it, she had to eat it. And Ding Qing wasn't qualified. Ding Qing wasn't mad at all, even though it was a very direct sentence. Instead, she stuck out her tongue. I'm sorry, President Hua. I didn't know. It's okay. You can take it out. Hua Jinyao lowered his head and focused on the document in front of him. Ding Qing picked up the piece of cake. The look on her face seemed to be still upset and blaming herself for her mistake. However, when she turned around, the regret in her eyes suddenly disappeared. Was he eating it because his wife bought it? She would like to see if Hua Jinyao would eat it when she brought it to his office again. Hua Jinyao came out of the shower with a towel on his head. He casually dried his hair with the towel, then sat in front of the dressing table, waiting for Su Qingsang to dry his hair for him. However, he was about to be disappointed. Su Qingsang was video chatting with Li Qianxue. After all this time, Li Qianxue's company had stabilized. She also found a professional manager to help her. Now that the company was stable, she looked much better. At the moment, she was talking to Su Qingsang about Old Master Li's birthday. Old Master Li's birthday was on the 3rd of next month. It was not many days away. Although it wasn't a birthday celebration. Old Master Li had just reunited with his granddaughter, and he hoped that Su Qingsang could come home to celebrate his birthday. However, even if Old Master Li wanted to, he didn't want to add to Su Qingsang's troubles. So, he could only talk about it in front of Li Qianxue. Li Qianxue found it funny, but also sad. Her daughter had never been taken care of for even a day. When she reunited with her granddaughter, she was married to a place so far away. I know you're busy with work, but your grandpa really wants you to come home. Qingsang, can you arrange it? Li Qianxue was a little careful with her words. She was really afraid that Su Qingsang wouldn't be willing. Speaking of which, during this period of time, the relationship between mother and daughter had improved a lot, but she still often worried that her daughter would choose to resent her because of the previous 20 years of neglect. Even though she knew that Su Qingsang wasn't that kind of person, some thoughts couldn't be suppressed. Mom. What are you talking about? Of course I have to come back for Grandpa's birthday. In the past, when she wasn't the granddaughter of the Li family, she would appear on Old Master Li's birthday, not to mention now that she was Old Master Li's biological granddaughter. Really? Okay, then I'll talk to your grandpa. The smile on Li Qianxue's face became a little more sincere. Su Qingsang also felt very happy. She actually missed Li Qianxue very much, although they could video chat every day and talk on the phone. But seeing her in person was still different from seeing her on video. Okay. You tell Grandpa that I will definitely come back. Then let Jinyao come back together. It was not right for her grandson-in-law to not be there. Okay, I'll tell him. Su Qingsang finished speaking, but there was one thing she didn't say. That was, what about Su Qinghui? Should he go back? However, looking at Li Qianxue's happy face, she didn't mention Su Qinghui in the end to make Li Qianxue unhappy. After ending the call, she saw Hua Jinyao sitting in the back. His hair was slightly wet, and his expression was a little sad. Hey, you took a shower. Then I'll go take a shower. Su Qingsang put down her phone and was about to get up, but Hua Jinyao grabbed her hand. Honey, help me dry my hair. Su Qingsang glanced at him, took the hairdryer from the side, and began to dry his hair for him. She also told him that she was going back to Lin City next month. Although it was next month, it was actually almost next week. It's Grandpa's birthday, so of course we have to go back. After Hu Jinao finished speaking, as if he suddenly thought of something, he said, "There are a lot of things to do in the company recently. I'll make some arrangements and go back with you when the time comes." "Thank you. You're so nice." Su Qingsang was very happy. She was so happy that she bent down to kiss Hu Jinao's face. For a moment, she forgot that she still had the hairdryer in her hand. "Ugh!" Hu Jinao groaned in pain. Only then did she realize that she had hurt him. "Are you okay? Let me see. Where are you hurt?" Hu Jinao put her on his lap and turned off the hairdryer. Seeing the worried look on her face, he leaned over and kissed her on the lips. "You're sad. You were so happy when you talked about going back to Lin City. I'm hurt. I need you to comfort me." Su Qingsang looked at his playful face and said, "How do you want me to comfort you? What do you think?" Hu Jinao put his arm around her waist, looked at her tender red lips, and kissed them hard. Every day after Hu Jinao went into the company, Ding Qing was responsible for telling him about his schedule for the day. Today, Hu Jinao didn't ask her to leave as he usually did. "Book 2 tickets for me on the second flight to Lin City." In the past, Zhang Yang had been the one to do all these things. After saying that, he noticed that Ding Qing was standing still and looking up at him. "What's wrong? Is there a problem?" "No problem." Ding Qing nodded. "President Hua, are you going to Lin City with Assistant Yang on a business trip?" "No. I'm going to Lin City with my wife." Ding Qing's hand that was holding the pen slightly tightened, but she smiled and nodded. "Okay. I'll go now." Hu Jinao thought that Su Qingsang would want to see Li Qianxue as soon as possible, so he asked Ding Qing to book the tickets for the morning. He waved his hand and let her go. After Ding Qing went back to her office, she didn't hurry to book the tickets. Instead, she took out her phone and dialed a few numbers. "President Hua is going to Lin City on the 2nd of next month." She told Ding Qing what she had heard. She didn't know what the other side of the phone said, but a bright smile appeared on her face. Chapter 5:11. After saying that, she kept listening to the man's voice. The smile on her face never faded. "Okay, I got it. I'll be careful. Don't worry. He doesn't suspect me for now. If you don't believe me, you can do it yourself." When Ding Qing smiled, there was a hint of playfulness in her eyes. More than that, she was confident. After hanging up, Ding Qing held the phone in her hand and spun it in a circle. She fixed her eyes on the desktop on the screen, which she had specially set up. It was Hu Jinao's photo. Su Qingsang gave the leave request to Sun Huya to sign. She was actually quite embarrassed. She had asked for leave several times in the past 2 months. She had been accompanying Shi Mengwan before, but this time, she was going back to Lin City. Although it hadn't been long, she still felt embarrassed. "It's okay. I know you're from Lin City." Sun Huya understood her well. "How about I give you one more day? You can come back to work on Tuesday. You can have a good rest then." Su Qingsang had been doing well since she came to the hospital. She had been very cooperative and good. Sun Huya didn't mind taking care of her. "That's great. Thank you, Director Sunday." After asking for leave, Su Qingsang started thinking about what she should buy for Old Master Li and Li Qianxue in Lin City after work. After all, her flight was tomorrow. She should ask Hu Jinao. She had given old Master Huo a parrot before, so she couldn't give him another parrot. She couldn't take it to Lin City either. She was still thinking about it. The emergency room downstairs sent a pregnant woman who had been in a car accident. Her condition was complicated. The emergency room said that Su Qingsang had seen this pregnant woman before, and the hospital had a record of it. Hearing that, Su Qingsang hurried forward. Su Qingsang looked at the woman. She looked familiar. Su Qingsang didn't remember who she was until the nurse brushed the woman's hair away from her face. Wasn't this the woman Li Hong who had tried to blackmail Zhang Yichen a month ago? This time, the woman wasn't pretending. She was really hit by a car. Su Qingsang looked at the big pool of blood on her body and said, "Hurry, get ready for surgery." The driver who drove her here was obviously frightened. He kept explaining, "I didn't hit her. She rushed out on her own. I didn't have time to avoid her. Don't say anything. Now is not the time to blame anyone. We need to save people." Su Qingsang didn't have time to argue with this man. Li Hong was 6 months pregnant the last time she was here. Now, she was 7 months pregnant. This was a good time, but also not a good one. If they were lucky, the child could be saved. If they were unlucky, the child might not be born safely, and the pregnant woman might not even be able to keep her life. Su Qingsang didn't have the energy to deal with the car owner. She ordered the doctors to prepare the operating room and push Li Hong into the delivery room. At the same time, he instructed Li Meilin to make sure that the pregnant woman's family members signed the paperwork when they arrived. After explaining everything, Su Qingsang followed him into the operating room. When he really went in, he found that the situation was quite bad. Since Li Hong was hit by a car, her whole body was sent flying. Her uterus had ruptured and she was bleeding profusely. She had to get the baby out as soon as possible. Sun Huiya heard about the situation and quickly came over. Looking at Li Hong, who had fainted from the pain, Su Qingsang voiced her opinion. "Director Sunday. The pregnant woman's uterus ruptured. We have to do the surgery as soon as possible." "Anne. I know. In such a situation, the pregnant woman's uterus might not be able to be saved. They had to do everything they could to save the baby." Su Qingsang and Sun Huiya had been working together a lot lately. They both knew what the other was thinking. After the surgery and emergency treatment, Li Hong's baby was finally separated from the mother's body. The baby is in good condition. Send it to the incubator for observation. After making sure that the baby was fine, Su Qingsang and Sun Huiya started to do emergency treatment for Li Hong. Not only her, but 2 doctors from the surgery department also came to help. After the C-section, Sun Huiya checked the condition of the uterus and said with a serious face, "Qingsang, I'm afraid her uterus can't be saved." The uterus was ruptured and bleeding profusely. It had to be removed. However, Sun Huiya had been a doctor for many years and had seen many cases. Li Hong had just given birth to a daughter. If Li Hong had a son before, it would be fine. What if it was her only child? It would be fine if the parents didn't value boys over girls. If the parents did, they would come to the hospital and cause a scene. "Qingsang, you don't need to worry about this. You can go now. I'll take care of the rest." They had been working in the hospital for a long time and were considered senior staff. However, Su Qingsang was different. She had only been working in the hospital for less than 3 months. She was still in her internship. If the family of the patient caused a scene, the hospital wouldn't do anything to them. However, Su Qingsang wouldn't be able to escape. "Director Sun, don't say anything. I won't leave. Let's finish the surgery first." She would be lying if she said she wasn't touched. She had been working in the hospital for less than 2 months. She was happy that Sun Huya was so considerate of her. However, she didn't think she did anything wrong. The most important thing was that Li Hong's life was still in danger. If there was anything else, it could wait until Li Hong was saved. After 3 hours of emergency treatment, Li Hong's life was finally saved. When Su Qingsang walked out of the surgery room, Li Hong's family was already there. This time, they didn't look as fierce as last time. The leader was Li Hong's husband. He looked anxious. "Doctor, are my wife and son okay?" Su Qingsang looked at the man in front of her. She raised her eyebrows slightly when she heard the word son. "Your wife is fine. She just gave birth to a daughter for you. Both of them are safe now." "What? Daughter?" The anxious look on Li Hong's husband's face disappeared immediately. "How can it be a daughter? I went to the master and he said it was a son." Su Qingsang wanted to say that Li Hong's uterus had been removed and she couldn't have a child anymore. However, before she could say anything, she was shocked by what Li Hong's husband did next. "Damn it! The master said it was a son. How did it turn out to be a daughter? No, I'm going to get even with him." Su Qingsang wanted to ask the man to go check on Li Hong and her daughter. To her surprise, Li Hong's husband ran out of the hospital without looking back. She had been working in the hospital for many years and had seen a lot of things. However, Su Qingsang didn't expect something like this to happen. She thought about it carefully and found it reasonable. If Li Hong's husband was a good person, he wouldn't allow his pregnant wife to blackmail others. However, Su Qingsang didn't know what to do now. She turned around and looked at Li Meilin. "Take the pregnant woman back to the ward. Find 2 volunteers to take care of her." Li Hong's husband didn't look like he would take care of his wife. "I know." Li Meilin nodded. Before she left, she looked at Su Qingsang worriedly. "Dr. Su, I think I need to warn you." "What?" "The pregnant woman's family is not to be trifled with. They still don't know that her uterus has been removed. If they find out..." Li Meilin didn't finish her sentence, but Su Qingsang understood what she meant. She patted Su Qingsang's shoulder. "Don't worry. They signed it. They signed it. Plus, it was a critical situation. I had to do it. If they want to get even with me, I'll reason with them. If they didn't reason with her, she wouldn't be able to do anything about it. She could just go through the legal process." Su Qingsang's plan was simple. Li Meilin wanted to persuade her, but Su Qingsang had already signed the papers and organized the surgery records. Su Qingsang waited until she got off work, but Li Hong's husband didn't come back to the hospital. She had seen this kind of situation before and wasn't a stranger to it. However, she still felt a little uncomfortable. She couldn't suppress the discomfort until she got home. Li Hong had woken up in the hospital, but she didn't know what she would do if she found out that her husband was in such a state. "You're back. I came to see you." Su Qingsang's thoughts finally came to an end at the door. Not only did Hu Jinyao come back early today, but he also prepared the gifts she was going to give her tomorrow. "Come and have a look. This is for your mother, this is for Su Yusin, and this is for Grandpa. It's not a birthday gift. I've ordered a birthday gift for someone else. Send it directly to Lin City, and we'll bring it to the Li family the day after tomorrow." "What is it?" Su Qingsang looked at Hu Jinyao's proud face and asked curiously, "What did you prepare?" "I'm not telling you. Anyway, I can tell you. Grandpa will love it. It's not a parrot, is it? Do you think I'm like you?" Hu Jinyao raised his eyebrows slightly and said teasingly. "What's wrong with me?" Su Qingsang didn't think that she gave the wrong bird. That parrot was so smart. It could even quarrel with people. Unknowingly, it would make the whole family more lively. Old Master Ho wouldn't be lonely because of it. How nice would that be? How dare you say that my parrot is a bad gift? Su Qingsang looked fierce. If Hua Jinyao said yes, she would fight him to the death. Hua Jinyao raised his hands and surrendered. I was wrong. How could a gift from my wife be bad? Of course, it's the best gift. That's more like it. Su Qingsang smiled. Since Hua Jinyao had bought the gifts, she couldn't think of anything better. Moreover, she couldn't think of anything better, so naturally, she gave the gift according to what Hua Jinyao had bought. After dinner, she packed up her belongings and put away the gifts. They had a home in Lin City, so they didn't need to bring too many things. It was just one suitcase for 2 people. Su Qingsang was happy when she thought that she could go back to Lin City tomorrow. She temporarily forgot about the episode in the hospital. The next day, Su Qingsang got up very early. Yang Wenchang came to the house early in the morning. He was responsible for driving Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang to the hospital today. Chapter 5:12. Hua Jinyao hung up the phone and looked at Su Qingsang guiltily. What's wrong? Su Qingsang had a hunch when she saw his face. There's an emergency at the company. I need to go back. Then. He wasn't going to Lin City with her. You go first. I'll book a flight in the afternoon. Hua Jinyao wasn't sure either. His expression was a bit serious. Okay. Looking at his expression, Su Qingsang thought for a moment, then added, if you can't make it in time, then forget it. Business is more important. Hua Jinyao leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. Don't worry. I'll deal with it as soon as possible. Of course, Su Qingsang believed him, but she had a bad feeling about it. Hua Jinyao drove Su Qingsang to the airport first. Then he left in a hurry. Su Qingsang looked at his back and suddenly felt a sense of emptiness in her heart. They had just parted. Why did she already start to miss him? Lin City. Li Qianxue was asking Xiaoyu and the others to redecorate Su Qingsang's room. The quilt and sheets had been exposed to the sun. She was still worried, so she looked at it again. Su Yusin stood next to her and watched Li Qianxue with a faint smile on his face. Mom. You've forgotten about me as soon as my sister came back. What are you talking about? Li Qianxue turned and glared at him, but her eyes were full of joy. She's alone in Rong City. Except for the old master, the rest of the Hua family doesn't seem easy to get along with. I'm worried about her. Especially when she thought of Lu Tongjia, Li Qianxue couldn't help but worry about Su Qingsang. She knew that Hua Jinyao was very good to Su Qingsang and that he would take good care of her. But to survive in a family like that, all she needed was her husband's love. However, Li Qianxue usually didn't show such worries in front of Su Qingsang. And Su Qingsang never talked about how the whole family was in front of her. She knew very well that Su Qingsang didn't want her to worry. With Su Qingsang's personality, even if something happened, she probably wouldn't tell her. Don't worry. I think big sister is very smart, she won't let herself be taken advantage of. Su Yusin had a deeper understanding of Su Qingsang after this interaction. He looked quiet, but he had his own plans. The whole family might not be able to bully her. After all, Su Qingsang wasn't a little white rabbit. Of course. Don't you know whose daughter she is? When Li Qianxue said this, there was a hint of pride on her face. Seeing the happiness on her face, Su Yusin really didn't want to spoil her mood, but there were some things that had to be said. Mom. Grandpa's birthday. Do you think Sister Pasian, At the mention of Su Peijian, Li Qianxue's face darkened. Although she didn't allow Su Peijian to stay in the Su family in a moment of impulse, Li Qianxue didn't think that she had chased Su Peijian out, nor did she really want to cut off all ties with her. After all, she had raised Su Peijian for more than 20 years. It would be a lie to say that she had no feelings for Su Peijian. But look at Su Peijian's behavior. Ever since she left the Su family, she hadn't even called her once, let alone visited her. No matter what, she was still her adoptive mother, right? After more than 20 years of affection, Su Peijian could be so cold-blooded. Should she, as an elder, take the initiative to contact Su Peijian? Li Qianxue couldn't do such a thing. She was also a person with her own pride. If Su Peijian didn't treat her as a mother, why should she treat her as a daughter? If Sister Peijian comes to celebrate Grandpa's birthday, then if she comes, she will naturally still be a daughter of the Su family. She would be a daughter of the Su family, but not her daughter. After all, old Master Li had doted on Su Peijian for so many years. If Su Peijian had a conscience, she would come tomorrow. However, if she really didn't come, then Li Qianxue really didn't want to recognize this daughter anymore. Su Yusin didn't speak. During this period, he had actually tried to contact Su Peijian, but unfortunately, Su Peijian hadn't responded to him. She didn't pick up his calls, and she didn't reply to his messages. He even sent her an email, but he didn't get the slightest response. He knew that Su Peijian still couldn't accept the fact that she wasn't Li Qianxue's child. However, some things, since they had already happened, could only be accepted. If she continued to be like this, Su Yusin would actually feel very embarrassed. Because at the mention of Su Peijian, Li Qianxue noticed that Su Yusin's tone wasn't very good. However, soon, she heard from Xiaoyu that Su Qingsang had arrived. Li Qianxue immediately smiled. She quickly went downstairs. Su Qingsang had told Li Qianxue her flight time before, and she had specially sent someone to pick Su Qingsang up. Now that she was back, old Master Li was very happy. However, he didn't forget to look behind her. Where's Jinyao? Grandpa, Jinyao has something to do at the company, but he promised me that he will fly over as soon as he is done. Su Qingsang didn't say when he would be busy. She had an intuition that this time, it wouldn't be so easy to solve. In fact, it wasn't that she didn't see that Hu Jinyao was acting strangely during this period. He obviously had more social engagements and spent more time on work. She could see the fatigue in his eyes, but she couldn't help him. It's okay. It's good that you're back. Old Master Li hadn't seen Su Qingsang for a while and really missed this granddaughter. He looked up and down, and there was some dissatisfaction in his eyes. Why do you look thinner? Is it because you're too tired? Of course not. Su Qingsang pinched her arm as she spoke. I don't even know how much muscle has grown out, and you still say that I've lost weight. I think you've lost weight. Li Qianxue came downstairs. When she saw Su Qingsang, she also felt that her daughter had lost weight. Is it because you're too tired from work? I don't think there's a time when you're not tired. In my opinion, you'd better change your job. It's really too hard to be a doctor. Mom, I'm already doing very well. It's considered easy. Look at the hospital's emergency department and surgery department. Which department wasn't busier than the obstetrics and gynecology department? How is it easy? Li Qianxue walked up to her daughter, took her hand, and looked her up and down. I think you've lost weight. You don't have to be a doctor. Go to Hu Jinyao's company and get a free job as the young mistress of the Hu family. Mom. Su Qingsang was about to laugh. What can I do at his company? Bring tea and water to him. He wouldn't dare. Li Qianxue was very protective. My daughter isn't going to be his tea girl. Even if he's Hu Jinao, he can't. Li Qianxue's eyes suddenly lit up. That's right. Why don't I open a branch office in Rome City? You can work at the branch office. She thought it was a good idea. Su Qingsang quickly dissuaded her. Mom, stop it. I'm not a business student. You said you'd open a company for me. What can I do if you really open a company? Then you'll just sit and watch others work. Mom. Su Qingsang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Why didn't she know that Li Qianxue had such a reckless side? Aren't you afraid that I'll make the company close down? So be it. We'll open another one then. Su Qingsang couldn't stand it anymore. Now she could really understand why Su Peijian used to be so arrogant. With such a doting attitude, it would be strange if the child didn't become unruly. Mom, don't worry. I'll definitely take good care of my body. These days, there are indeed a little more things to do in the hospital. But don't worry, after this period, it shouldn't be so busy. After all, the country had just allowed the second child not long ago. It was normal for the hospital to have a few more children. After this period, she believed that she wouldn't be so busy. That's what you said. Li Qianxue looked at Su Qingsang, afraid that she was lying to her. When the time comes, if you don't gain some weight and gain some weight, I won't be satisfied. I promise. Su Qingsang raised her hand and saluted. Not only Li Qianxue, but even Old Master Li and Su Yusin laughed. Su Qingsang took out the gift that Hu Jinao had prepared. What the gift was not important to Old Master Li and the others at all. What was important was the intention of his granddaughter. The atmosphere of the family was quite harmonious and beautiful. In such an atmosphere, Su Qingsang put aside the little bit of melancholy that Hu Jinao couldn't be with her all the time. On the other side, Hu Jinao and Yang Wenchang returned to the company. They went upstairs, but before they could enter the office, they were blocked by someone. He Xianyao and Ding Qing stood opposite each other. He Xianyao seemed to want to go to Hu Jiniao's office. Ding Qing was blocking He Xuanyao way. I told you, President Hua isn't here today. I don't believe you. I heard you on the phone just now. Didn't he say that he would be back soon? It's been so long. He should be back, right? President Hua really didn't come back. Before Ding Qing could finish, Hu Jinyao and Yang Wenchang arrived. Seeing that it was him, He Xianyao gave Ding Qing a hateful glare, then rushed up to him. Hu Jinyao. She might be really angry, because her tone wasn't very nice. Not only did she not call him President Hua, but she also didn't call him Brother Jinyao. Hu Jinyao still had work to deal with, so he didn't have time to deal with this spoiled girl. He didn't expect that He Xianyao would stand in front of him again when he was about to walk past her to enter the office. Hu Jinyao. Hu Jinyao looked at He Xianyao in front of him with cold eyes. What do you want? Can't I come to you if I don't have anything to say? He Xuanyao's voice was full of grievance when she said that. In fact, she couldn't stand it anymore after working at Tianyu Group. She didn't expect Hu Jinyao to be so cruel. He demoted her to the marketing department and said that she was going to study. The so-called study was being tortured by her ugly and bad-tempered boss every day. He said that she was doing market research, but he made her stand outside in the cold wind. She didn't see anyone, and she had to wait outside for people to come and do questionnaires. Chapter 513. Moreover, He Xianyao didn't believe that the headquarters of Tianyu Group needed someone to do a questionnaire. If their company wanted to collect data, they already had professionals. Not to mention a big company like Tianyu Group, She didn't want to do it, so the ugly man told her to get out. She didn't want to leave. At least, she didn't want to leave like this. She hadn't proven her ability in front of Hu Jinniao. How could she leave? It wasn't easy for her. She had to beg people to collect the data. The ugly man said that the data she collected couldn't be trusted and that there was too little data. What did that mean? If he didn't deliberately make things difficult for her, then He Xianyao would really be an idiot. Today was the same thing. He said that the data from a few days ago didn't count and forced her to investigate again. He Xianyao had an argument with her boss downstairs. After the argument, she said that she wanted to resign and left. However, when she really came out, she thought of what Lu Tongjia had told her and didn't want to leave. After thinking about it, she had to go upstairs to find Hu Jinniao and ask for an explanation from him. In what capacity? Hu Jinniao's voice was indifferent. He looked at He Xianyao impolitely. I'm just looking for you. Do I still need your status? He Xianyao was furious. What else? Hu Jinniao looked at He Xianyao as if she was an idiot. If you came to me as an employee, then you can write a report and give it to your boss. He can give it to me. If you came to me as a private person, then I'm sorry. I have nothing to say to you, and I have nothing to say to you. Hu Jinniao. He Xianyao had been pampered since she was a child. All the grievances she had suffered came from Hu Jinniao. Why do you have to treat me like this? I just like you. You like me, so I should let you like me. What kind of logic was that? Besides, I have a wife. Don't you know? She doesn't deserve you. Speaking of this, He Xianyao was very unconvinced. Even Auntie doesn't like her. How can a woman like her deserve you? She doesn't deserve you, but you do. Hu Jinniao glanced at He Xianyao coldly and said, It seems that Miss He didn't look at herself in the mirror before going out. He Xianyao was on the verge of tears. She had never expected Hu Jinniao to be so vicious. No matter what, I'm Li Junqing's cousin. You have such a good relationship with my cousin. Is this how you bully me? Junqing is Junqing, and you are you. If you continue to pester me so unreasonably, I won't give face to Lian Junqing anymore. His expression told He Xianyao that he was telling the truth. He was serious. She burst into tears, turned around, and left without looking back. Yang Wenchang and Ding Qing were still standing there when she was talking to Hu Jinniao. The only difference was that Yang Wenchang already knew that He Xianyao would be put in a difficult position. In fact, he was the one who asked Zhang to do it. Apparently, it was the first time that Ding Qing had seen Hu Jinniao like that. She stood there without moving, staring at Hu Jinniao. So, he was this ruthless to other women. Ding Qing didn't expect that. Recently, Hu Jinniao hadn't been gentle to her, but he had been polite. After all, she was confident in her abilities. Occasionally, Hu Jinniao would praise her for doing a good job. Only now did she realize that he was being polite when he was usually cold. Hu Jinniao came back to his senses and found that his secretary was in a daze. He frowned slightly and said, Secretary Ding. Is there anything else? I'm sorry, President Hu, Ding Qing apologized immediately. I'm really sorry. I tried to stop her, but she just didn't want to listen to me. It's okay. It's not your fault. Hu Jinniao thought of the phone call earlier. He wasn't in the mood to deal with He Xianyao. If she wanted to stay, she had to follow the rules of Tianyu Group. If she wanted to leave, he would be more than happy to let her go. By the way, President Hu, I've put the documents on your desk. You see. I'll go now. Hu Jinniao strode towards his office. Ding Qing narrowed her eyes and stopped thinking. She quickly followed Hu Jinyao into his office. Old Master Li's birthday wasn't a birthday celebration, so he didn't plan to make it a big one. He only invited Old Master Li's cousin, Old Master Li, and his great-aunt. They also invited their children and grandchildren. It was about the same as the last time Su Qingsang invited them. Although Li Qinchue prepared a room for Su Qingsang, she thought that Hu Jinyao would come back with her. Hu Jinyao didn't come back, so she dragged Su Qingsang to sleep with her. The mother and daughter chatted for the whole night. They were so close that Su Yusin still looked jealous when he got up and left the room this morning. "Mom, you're so biased. Now that my sister is back, you're ignoring me." Li Qinchue looked at her son's jealous face and reached out to poke his forehead. "How old are you? Why are you still jealous of your sister? Don't you think that you're both boys? Why? Do you still need your mother to coax you to sleep?" Su Yusin hooked his arm around Li Qinchue's arm. "Mom, I'm just jealous." "What? You're the only one who can be biased, but I can't be jealous." Su Qingsang was amused. "Don't be jealous. I'll be leaving in 2 days anyway. I'll return Mom to you then." She suddenly turned serious and looked at Su Yusin with a sad face. "Speaking of which, if brother doesn't like me coming back, then I won't come back next time." No. I just said it casually." Su Yusin quickly reached out to put his arm around her shoulder. "Sister, don't take it seriously." Su Qingsang looked at his hand on her shoulder and suddenly laughed. "Yes. I'm also joking. Don't take it seriously." "Well, you actually scared me." When Su Yusin spoke, he wanted to tickle Su Qingsang. How could Su Qingsang let him do what he wanted? After a cry, she quickly ran downstairs. Su Yusin hurriedly followed behind. Li Qinchue looked at her 2 children laughing and joking like this, as if the previous gap of more than 20 years did not exist. She curled her lips because of this recognition. The current state was very good. She liked the current state. If possible, she really hoped that Su Qingsang and Su Yusin would be by her side forever. However, she also knew that that could only be her wishful thinking. After Su Qingsang got married, she would be a member of the Huo family in the future. Su Yusin was still young, even though he had already been recommended. Although he had been recommended, he still had to go to school in the future. After the children grew up and left, she would be alone again. This thought disappeared when she went downstairs and saw Su Yusin and Su Qingsang sitting together. Chapter 5:14. After breakfast, Su Qingsang sat with Old Master Li for a while, then used the bathroom as an excuse to hide and call Hu Jinyao. Today was Old Master Li's birthday. She wanted to see if he could make it. When Hu Jinyao didn't show up last night, she knew that he wouldn't be able to make it. She believed that he had important business matters to attend to since he didn't return to Lin City with her to celebrate Old Master Li's birthday. However, she still hoped that Hu Jinyao could rush over at the last minute. Although she had already guessed that Hu Jinyao might not be able to leave. Su Qingsang couldn't hide her nervousness when the call was connected. "Jinyao. Wife. I was so busy yesterday that I forgot to call you." "I'm fine." Even through the phone, Su Qingsang could hear the hoarseness in his voice. "Jinyao, are you okay?" "I'm fine." Hu Jinyao sounded more energetic than before. "Honey, I'm afraid I can't come to celebrate Grandpa's birthday." "It's okay. Grandpa won't mind." Yesterday, she didn't say anything definite in front of her grandfather. She only said that Hu Jinyao would rush over after finishing his work. He believed that Grandpa would understand. "Take care of yourself." Don't get too tired. Su Qingsang thought for a moment and added, and remember to eat. I know. I will. The corners of Hu Jinyao's lips curled up slightly. Because of Su Qingsang's concern, he became much gentler. Honey, Hu Jinyao suddenly called her name. I miss you. They had only been apart for a day, but Hu Jinyao already missed her. If she was here, even if she didn't do anything, even if she didn't know anything. As long as she was by his side, he always felt a lot more at ease. Even if she couldn't help her in business. As long as she was in his arms, he would feel at ease. I missed you too. Her eyes were shining. It's okay. I'll be back in a couple of days. Yes. I'll be waiting for you. Hu Jinyao hung up the phone. His face was no longer as relaxed as before. He looked at the stack of documents in front of him, and his face was unprecedentedly serious. Li Qianxue confirmed the lunch menu with the kitchen again. When he came out, he found Su Qingsang hiding in the corridor and talking on the phone. By the time she saw it, she had already hung up. Mom. Su Qingsang walked towards her quickly. Are you looking for me? Are you calling Jinyao? How was it? Can he come over? Su Qingsang shook her head, looking a little guilty. Something urgent happened in his company, and he had to deal with it. That's why he couldn't make it. I'm fine. I understand. Li Qianxue held her hand and asked her to go to the living room with her. If he can't come, then so be it. In any case, the people who came today were all family members. You've seen many of them before. Yes. I know. My paternal grandfather and his descendants, as well as my paternal aunt and her descendants. Besides, he had seen them before, but he didn't interact much with them. It's good that they know each other. Anyway, they are relying on the Li family to live. His attitude toward you will definitely be very polite. If anyone is rude to you or gives you a hard time, don't hold it in. Just fight back. Don't think that she didn't know that many of those people had targeted Su Qingsang in the past, openly or secretly. Although these things were related to her attitude in the past. But the past was the past, and now was the present. Now the situation was different. Of course, she wouldn't let anyone bully her daughter again. Not even the slightest bit of attitude was allowed. Mom, I know. Don't worry. They won't. Not to mention that she had acknowledged Li Qianxue now, just based on her identity as the wife of the president of Tianyu Group. As long as those people weren't stupid, they wouldn't think of provoking her, right? I know they won't. But I'm afraid that someone won't be smart. Li Qianxue patted Su Qingsang's hand. Anyway, remember, in this family, no one can make you feel wronged. Mom. Su Qingsang's eyes were a little sore and touched. She rubbed her face against Li Qianxue's shoulder. Her voice was very soft. You're going to spoil me. What's wrong with spoiling you? Li Qianxue didn't think she was going too far. I think it's too late. If she had known earlier, she would have loved her daughter earlier. How could things have developed to this point? She had missed so many years with her daughter. Li Qianxue was still upset that she hadn't discovered it earlier. She was gritting her teeth at Su Qinghui, who had caused this situation. However, as soon as she entered the living room with Su Qingsang, she saw a person who shouldn't have been there. Su Qinghui. Seeing that it was him, Li Qianxue's face immediately darkened. She glared at Su Qinghui with a cold face, as if she wanted to stare a hole in his body. Why are you here? Ever since they signed the divorce papers, the two of them hadn't seen each other for nearly 2 months. Because of Su Qinghui's resignation, the Li Corporation's business had been on her shoulders for a long time. Li Chinchua's ability wasn't bad, but the sudden increase of so much work also made her very tired. It was also because of this period of busy work that she didn't have time to think about Su Qinghui. It was very easy for her to know about him, but she didn't want to know. Even when her son or daughter mentioned this person in front of her, she would still be unhappy. Since he had already left, he was no longer here. There was no need for him to come back, let alone show up. If he wanted to see the children, he could just see them outside. This was good for both him and her. She didn't want to see this person. Now that she suddenly saw Su Qinghui, Li Chinchua was really unhappy. The guests in this house hadn't arrived yet. What was Su Qinghui doing here? What are you doing here? Get out. You're not welcome here. Even in front of the two children, Li Chinchua didn't mind making Su Qinghui lose face. In her opinion, she didn't need to give him face at all. After Li Chinchua appeared, Su Qinghui's eyes were fixed on her. They hadn't seen each other for nearly 2 months, and she seemed to have lost a little weight. She looked good. Today was old Master Li's birthday. She had put on light makeup. Because it was a family banquet, Li Chinchua didn't wear a dress. She was wearing a simple red dress, festive and flamboyant. She was clearly in her 40s, but she was able to completely suppress such a gorgeous color. Just like her personality, she was clear about her likes and dislikes. Like a flame, people couldn't help but be attracted to her. Su Qinghui. Noticing that Su Qinghui was staring at her, Li Chinchua felt even worse. What are you doing here? Today is Dad's birthday. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.